event, the Greek community in transition here at St. Michael's Anglican Church. My name is Nikos Nikolopoulos. It's my pleasure to be your MC for this evening. Allow me the opportunity to thank the management of St. Michael's Anglican Church for allowing us to use this beautiful and most sacred of spaces. They have donated this space for our event and it is much appreciated. In particular, heartfelt thank yous to the Executive Minister of St. Michael's Anglican Church, Reverend Dr. Francis McNabb. Further, thank you to Ms. Sylvia Cozier, the General Manager, and Mr. Jackson Rain, the Technical Director. An additional thank you to our partners, the Greek Orthodox community of Melbourne and Victoria, the Victorian Multicultural Commission, and the Centre for Dialogue at La Trobe University, under whose auspices this event is being held. A quick disclosure here, I am a staff member at La Trobe, of course, it seems that most people here are. However, I'm in another faculty. Our discussion tonight will be in English, however, we serve to include all, and all contributions are most welcome. In the event that commentary and discussion is in Greek, we will make every effort to translate and do so effectively and correctly. In beginning proceedings for tonight, I would like to call upon Professor Chris Mackey, the Head of School and Professor of Greek Studies at La Trobe University. Professor Mackey studied Latin and Greek at the University of Newcastle and completed his PhD at the University of Glasgow. He joined the Research Centre for Greek Studies at La Trobe in mid-2010. Ladies and gentlemen, Christopher Mackey.
Thank you very much, Nikos. It's a great pleasure to be here, and Michaelis Michael came to see me some time ago and said, I really want to run this Greek dialogue, and basically, do you have any money? And I said, yeah, we'll do that, and it seemed like a fantastic idea, and I'm delighted to be here, and I'm particularly delighted to see so many people here, and we're hoping that this is the beginning of a much bigger venture, and Michaelis will talk about some of those things as we move through. I'm actually the Vice-Chancellor for tonight, because I come with bearing apologies from the Vice-Chancellor, Professor John Dewar, who couldn't come tonight. He's just back from China, and then he's had to go off on another mission and so forth. So he sends his apologies, but he welcomes you through me. I'd just like to say a few words about, this has been a big year. As we come to the end of the year, one tends to reflect, and this has been a big year for Greek studies, ancient and modern. I'm in the ancient area, but we've done a lot, I think, in the modern area this year. We're making headway with the Greek archives, as you probably read, and some of the people who are involved in that process, in the committees and so forth, are here with us tonight. I just come about 2 weeks ago from a very successful conference that we ran here in Melbourne on Kavafi and Kazantzakis, which Maria Erodotou coordinated, and some of the people who are organising this event tonight, like Dimitri Gonis and others, Chris Fifas are here tonight. That was a great success. And I think we're making some headway on the teaching of modern Greek language at La Trobe, because from next year, from 2014, we now have the capacity to enrol students from other faculties. So you can be a business student or a law student and what have you, and you can come and do modern Greek as part of your degree. So we really hope that this boosts the language. It's so important to Greek studies to have this, the modern Greek language taught, and big full classes, because if we can do that, that's a really major success for us, and it really cements the place of modern Greek studies at La Trobe University and in the community. And of course, you play a big part in that, because most of you are Greek speakers, and most of you can get behind us as we try to win that battle with all those politicians and university managers and so forth. But things are looking pretty good for next year, so I come with that good message, and I'm hoping that events like this really support this process. That's enough from me. I'm on a tight timeline. I've been given 3 minutes, and I'm sure I've been up here for 3 minutes. But thank you for coming. Welcome and good luck tonight. I'm going to be sitting up there watching, and I'm hoping it's a really great event. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Mackey. Of course, part of this space is it's being all-inclusive. I will correct an error that I made, denominational one at that. This is actually St Michael's Uniting Church, not the Anglican Church. Apologies, but I'm sure we're all the greater for it. Mr. Adonis Piperoglou is a graduate of Trobe University with a research interest in the Greek community and PhD student in history. Adonis will now provide a context for tonight's discussion with a presentation on the history and development of the Greek community.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here. Before I begin, I'd like to thank Professor Chris Mackey, Professor Alberto Gomez, Dr. Michalis Michael, and Dimitri Gonis for their efforts in bringing this event to the fore. And I'd like to thank our discussants, whose professional opinions I very much look forward to hearing. I'd also like to acknowledge you, the audience, whose attendance here tonight I think is testament to the richness and diversity that exists within the Greek community today. Just a brief personal background. My mother arrived to Australia in the 1970s from Cyprus, and my father is of Castoralesian background, whose descendants arrived here in the 1940s and 1920s. I grew up in Canberra and I moved to Melbourne several years ago to start my studies. As a proud, self-identifying Greek Australian, I'm very honoured to witness and be part of this landmark event, and I have no doubt that the dialogue tonight will generate a lively, innovative and stimulating experience for us all. I optimistically anticipate that much of what will be discussed here tonight will trigger ongoing conversations between our families and friends, colleagues, from the workplace to the coffee shop and around the dinner table. So in the brief time I have with you this evening, I'd like to sketch out key historical currents that overlay the rich story, or stories if you like, of the Greek presence in Australia. So it is well known in Australian history of the arrival of Greeks, and less acknowledged, however, are the attempts of Greeks to define themselves within the embryonic stages of Australian nation building. From the colonial period and during the immediate years before and after Federation, Greeks held a particular respectable status. Their religious, civilizational and cultural heritage permitted them a particular yet peculiar place within the nation, which still held close ties to the British Empire. As this painting here suggests and shows by the Australian Impressionist artist Tom Roberts, Greeks were present at Federation. Nestled behind Australia's first Catholic cardinal there in the red cape, oh, forgive me, the red cape there is Australia's first Orthodox priest. They came from Jerusalem, Athanasios Kantopoulos. The image of Kantopoulos in this painting does not record a mere unreflective transplantation of Greek orthodoxy in the host nation, nor does it represent the intrusion of an alien body, but rather the compatibility, even confluence, between the cultures of two nations and ethnicities. In this context, his presence serves as two important functions. It shows the political and cultural currency that Greek Orthodoxy had established in Australia, and we're all probably very well aware of Evangelismos down on Victoria Street, which by this stage the foundation stone had been laid, while it also simultaneously advanced the bond between the relatively new nation of modern Greece in 1821 and the birth of the Australian nation, 1901. Although the presence of Greeks within the nation was often scrutinised, Greeks nonetheless contributed to the Australian nation building project. In doing so, they began to redefine, rework, and at times reject their Greekness when the society they had begun to call home. So, the early stages of the Greek community from the 1890s, by and large to the 1930s, was predominantly male. A community of men that moved across rural towns and cities. Many anglicised their names and blended and identified with the dominant British culture. It's a story of modest success where Greeks found work, built capital, raised families. The 1901 census documents just under 1,000 Greeks in Australia. We get to the 1911 census, we just have under 2,000. These statistics, though, are somewhat misleading, for it only records people of Greek birth coming from the Greek nation. It does not include Greeks from Egypt, from Asia Minor and Cyprus, for example. As the Greek population grew in between the wars, the census of 1947 had about 13,000 Greeks. I'd just like to briefly turn your gaze to the racist cartoon here. In the 1920s, racial discourse began to position Greeks as racially inferior, white but not white enough, part of the nation but simultaneously excluded from it. And so Greeks began to work out ways to situate themselves proudly within the nation. And here we have, on the right there, the first Greek book published in Australia, written in Greek. It was actually recently republished in 2007 in English, if you want a copy. Importantly so, I think. But this book shows a particular distinctive Australian Hellenism that had begun to evolve. A network of Greeks had been talking to each other from Melbourne to Sydney to Perth to Queensland, from Brisbane to Ingham, down to South Australia. And I'd also like to turn your gaze to the Niagara Cafe there in Gundagai. You notice the British flag. They were British loyalists. They identified strongly with the British nation, and through this, the British Empire. And through this, they gained a particular place within the nation that other ethnic minorities may not have had. But also, you notice that the name of the cafe is the Niagara Cafe. Greeks did not necessarily come from Greece per se. They may have also come from America. They may have had relatives in other parts of the world. And through that, there was a kind of Americanization of the hospitality retail industry that lives with us today. So, just moving quickly now to the 1940s to the 1960s, a rapid change occurs. A large influx of Greeks arrive post-World War II. They're actually the third largest group after people from the United Kingdom and Italy. And part of this is also due to assisted migration, relationships between the Australian government and the Greek government allowing Greeks to come here. But more interestingly to me is that through this assisted migration, there were considered efforts to include and bring women. This would change the makeup of a Greek Australia. And women have been fundamental to the establishment of clubs and community events ever since. So the numbers increased, and by 1952, between 1952 and 1982, we have about 75,000 Greek migrants who received assisted passage. The Greek-born population by 1961 had reached about 77,000, more than 6 times its population in 1947. And in the next 10 years, the population doubled again to reach a peak of 160,000. I now move to an era, a time that we probably all can identify with more closely. By the 1970s, the children of these new migrants of the 60s and 70s had begun to graduate, my father being one of them. They had begun to set up and politicise multicultural issues. The Greek Welfare Society, which celebrated its 40-year anniversary last year, was a big fundamental shifter within this change. And as we get to the 1980s, I have here a picture of Acropolis now. Greekness could be identified within mainstream Australian society. Greeks were able to sell their distinctiveness and use it for particular gains. And moving into the 90s, a period that I'm quite interested in, as it very much links to my childhood, we have more nuanced understandings of a Greek Australia, a changing community, a community where we might wish to imagine, I've got a picture of Christos Sulkis there, an underground environment, people able to express and understand themselves outside of the norms that may have been placed upon them. And also through this, of course, I can't help but have noticed this evening, across from St. Michael's, is Paspalis' pearls. Greeks have managed to situate themselves quite strongly within the arts, education, business, sport, politics. And it is through that I'd like by and large to say that we're in that space today, in those spaces. But there are issues. There are at present current demographic shifts. 2011 census recorded about 100,000 people of Greek-born descent, and it's a drop of 9.1% from the 2006 census. This has resulted in a steady decline in the number of Greek-borns, so that between 1991, the figures have fallen quite substantially, and as a result, the Greek presence may or may not be as healthy as it once was. I'd like to say that maybe events tonight will show us otherwise. I took this photo only a few days ago, if you can read it there, probably a bit blurry, from the Greek-Australian moorland community. And I was lucky enough to have noticed, to catch it at a moment when the electric scooter was parked out the front. The community's changing. Well, what does this mean? All right, I'll leave you now briefly with an image from that wonderful era in the 70s, an image that cheekily captures a moment in Greek Australia when the in-betweenness of a Greek Australian identity was upheld and valued as an important aspect of Australian multicultural identity, a confluence, a coming together of cultural signifiers, a synergy, if you like, of cultural tropes that perhaps or perhaps not has extended into the minds of younger generations like myself. So thank you, and I hope you enjoy tonight's proceedings.
Thank you, Adonis. Well, thank you. As a matter of courtesy, ladies and gentlemen, if I could just remind you once more to either switch off your phones or please put them on silent. Thank you. Before we move on to our next speaker, who needs no introduction but will receive one, just on a point, you may have received, walking in here today, coming here today, a pamphlet that was distributed outside of the church here. Clearly, we have no connection with the organisation that's handing out those pamphlets, nor is it something that we have been or knew of. So just making that clear to everyone. Most importantly, As the Deputy Director of the Centre for Dialogue at Trobe University, Dr. Michael has been at the forefront and instrumental in cross-cultural engagement. Renowned for his work in this area and sporting what I must say is a rather fashionable beard, poetic at that, I call upon Dr. Michael for background and an introduction to tonight's discussion.
Thank you very much. Why dialogue? Well, increasingly we live in an age where the pathology of the monologue prevails. Some even claim that with the advent of the website and Facebook and social media, we are increasingly encroaching the scourge of the antilogue. As an antidote to monologue, as a contrast, if you like, μια αντιπρόταση. Dialogues finds meaning in its etymological roots. After all, dialogos is a Greek word. However, somebody also pointed out that monologue is also a Greek word. So much for that theory. So, dialogos, a compound word, means across the spoken word, or it could also mean, which is my preference, through the word, through the logos. And logos in context is not the literary word. Logos means truth, means meaning. So in essence, a conversation towards truth. Earlier there was a quote by one of my favorite modern Greek philosophers and educationalists, Evangelos Papanoutsos, who said, στο διάλογο πάμε όχι για να σώσουμε τις ιδέες μας, αλλά για να σώσουμε την αλήθεια. We enter dialogue not to salvage our ideas, but to save truth. And I think that's something that we should keep in mind. For after all, monologue is ultimately about control. As a process and a mindset, dialogue needs to bring down and break down certain barriers in order to reach that dialogical plateau. Barriers such as skopimodites, expediency, pride, self-serving interests, patriotic and the partisan, things that hold us back from really liberating ourselves. For dialogue ultimately and ideally aspires to the poetic rather than being confined to the vestiges of the political. Why the Greek community? Of course, why not? But anyway, I found the epiphany of the Greek community having a dialogue, not only because the dialogue is a Greek word, and the exception and the rareness of the Greek community in the most unlikely of places. On the 20th of March 2007 at the Northcote Town Hall, a Spanish-Australian comedian, Simon Palomares, had a show, a comedy show, Il Dago, and in a sober moment that sometimes overcomes comedians and they become philosophers, he reflected on how unique the Greek-Australian community as a historical phenomenon it is. Never in time and space will the Greek-Australian community come again. It is so rare. You saw from Andonis Piberoglou's brief, very brief snapshot, sort of survey of the Greek community of the last 100 and so years, that it's come to a point of transition. It's at a turning point, at a crossroad. As the first generation settler migrant generation is eclipsed, it is replaced now by second and third generation. The questions, the challenges that it throws up is something that we need to discuss today. We've chosen Socratic cycles, or the Socratic dialogues, as an experiment. It might work, it might not. We'll see. The first circle comprises of seasoned perspectives, veterans, if you like. I know some would take me to task for that. So be it. Who will reflect and analyse and audit where has the Greek community or the Greek presence, let's say, in Australia come to. There are even disputation and challenges on the notion of a community. There are people who find themselves or found themselves at the margins or even outside. What we want to do is to stipulate and stimulate a conversation, long overdue, within the community and beyond. And one of the reasons we're holding it in St. Michael's on Collins is to get out of our Greek stekia. And you can't get more mainstream than the corner of Collins Street and Russell Street. It's a story that needs to be told and analysed. The second circle in the Socratic dialogues are new perspectives within inverted commas, okay? New voices. To see where is Greek identity and entity going to be in 5, 10, 20 years' time. What language are they going to speak? And I don't mean just linguistically. What are their needs? What are their challenges? Will there be such a thing as a Greek community? What will be the infrastructure, the institutions? What will happen to the accumulated real estate of over 200 and so Greek organizations when they can't be staffed by second and third generation who don't practice the volunteerism of the first generation? These are big challenges. What is the meaning of the homeland, I patrida, going to have to the second, third, and fourth, and fifth generation? There's no answers here, there are only challenges. Now, this is supposed to be a looking glass experience. That is, we get these people here in a circle. Well, it's not quite a circle, it's not even a semicircle. It's more of a curve. And they are going to be conversing amongst themselves, and you people look into it. Then we go into a change. We get the second circle up. They do the same. And hopefully by the end, we have an opportunity for questions and answers. We deliberately use in English language, although, this is... Nick mentioned, there will be facilities for translation, for questions and answers and interventions. Now, without any further ado, I think we should introduce our first circle, or Protos Kyklos.
Thank you, Michalis.
You're welcome.
Now, as Michalis explained, the first of the circles involves the following participants, each of whom have achieved many things, too many to mention here today. So please excuse me if the introductions are brief, but I'm sure you will all speak for yourselves. Kyriakos Amanatidis has a BA degree from Melbourne University and a Bachelor of Letters degree from the University of New England. He has taught Greek language and literature at Melbourne University and received the Order of Australia Medal. As I call your name, please do come up and take a seat. And please, in order of brevity as well, if you could leave your applause to the end of the participants. Kathy Alexopoulos is the president of the Greek Australian Cultural League. She became actively involved in the Greek community affairs since 1995 and president of the Greek Australian Cultural League since 1999. Christos Fifis is an academic and author who has taught Greek studies at RMIT Victoria College and La Trobe for over 30 years. Yvonne Panagakos is a former educationalist and community supporter. She has extensive experience in education and has worked in all levels of education for over 35 years. George Papadopoulos AM, a community activist and retired senior public servant, was the former head of community education and information at the Australian Institute of Multicultural Affairs. Evgenia Mitrakas, OAM, is a noted lawyer and notary public. She has organised many conferences in Greece and is an active participant in cultural exchanges between our two countries. Kostas Nikolopoulos is a freelance journalist, during whose long career he has written for many of the leading Greek newspapers. Rena Fragiodakis, also received an Order of Australia Medal, is a journalist and broadcaster. Rena can be heard on 3XY. Mike Safiropoulos, AM, is a community activist and retired senior public servant. He has over 40 years of community involvement in a range of community positions. I will now hand over to Dr. Michael, who will facilitate our first circle.
Thank you very much. Thanks. Now, this is going to be a bit tricky, but let's try and endure. There's one mic here. Let's try turn it on. what we wanted to do is to go around this curve and sort of briefly give a personal migration narrative. Now, I'll start with myself, all right, as example. And I think I was born in Sydney in 1960. My parents came from Cyprus in the 1950s. We then left Australia in 1962 and returned in 1975 as refugees from northern Cyprus. That's all we want. Okay, we'll start with Kyriakos. Kyriakos, hopefully this is on. Now, as I said, bear with us. I think it works.
I was born in northern Greece, 1936. Came to Australia in 1958. Worked at the MCG, the one that is closing down now. So I have had the experience there. And studied at Melbourne University. Joined the ABS, Australian Bureau of Statistics, and taught on a part-time basis at secondary and tertiary institutions.
Thank you, Kyriakos. Even shorter, Kathy.
Even shorter.
Even shorter. Just want
Well,
to
I
hear
was
your
born
voice.
in Greece, in Komotini, although I don't have any parents from there. My parents were from Asia Minor, came to Australia in 1957, studied here, primary, secondary and tertiary education, then moved back to Greece, married, had a family, came back here, continued studies, started working, and became part of the Cultural League and part of the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Christo?
Thank you. Christos Fifis. I was born in Central West Greece in 1940. I came to Australia in 1965. I learned English by myself and with some teachers while I was working. I went to Trobe University. I studied part-time economics. And when I finished economics, I did also modern Greek with the University of New England. Then I did DPED, I did postgraduate studies, and I taught Greek studies at RMIT, Victoria College, at Trobe University for 30 years.
Thank you. Thank you, Christo. Shorter. Shorter.
Okay. I'm Yvonne Panagakis. I was born in Melbourne, 1950. My mother was also born in Melbourne. My grandparents were here. My great-grandparents came in 1912. So we have a long connection in this country and seen a number of changes over the years. My father came to Australia in the first ship after the war. He was able to get passage and came and married my mother. So we are a very strong Castellaresian connection. And I went on to study teaching at the primary, secondary level, and after working in a number of schools, I've spent the last 12 years as Deputy Principal of Alphington Grammar, which I enjoyed very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Yvonne. George?
George Papadopoulos, born in Melbourne in 1937, and with now experience in law, public administration and tertiary education.
Thank you. That's it.
I was born on the island of Lesbos and came here in the mid-50s as an 8-year-old. All my education was here, and did law arts degree at the University of Melbourne. Have practiced as a sole practitioner in South Melbourne since 1972. I have been involved in community work since an undergraduate and have continued that. I have of late been involved in promoting Greece and Greek culture from the mainstream rather than within the community.
Thank you, Evgenia. And I need to say that Evgenia is in this circle under protest. She wanted to be in the other one. But thank you for...
I'm Kostas Nikolopoulos. I was born in Patras, the Peloponnese in southern Greece, migrated to Australia in 1971. I was a graduate of the Institute of American Studies when I arrived to Australia, so as a bilingual, I was lucky to get work within the mainstream media in the early 70s. I'm holding a Bachelor of Arts degree majoring in modern Greek sociology. And I have since been working with the Greek Australian media, as well as being I would say proudly, the person who helped get it in Australia, and in particular, Odyssey program.
Thank you, Costa. Rena.
My name is Rena Frangiudaki. I was born in Chania, Crete, sorry. And I came to Australia early 1966. I've been involved since I came here, the first months of my arrival in Australia with the community. I've got the Bachelor of the Greek community, because community studies. And thank you very much for having me here.
Rena, Mike?
Thank you. My name is Mike Zafiropoulos. I came to Australia in 1967 as a teenager. I've studied here and thought I'd be returning back after the completion of my studies. As is usually the case, I've stayed here and I'm very happy about it. My main interest has been community involvement, and I have had the privilege to be involved in a number of organisations, both within the Greek community and the broader Australian community.
And you came from where? Where were you born? Eh?
I was born in Florina and was brought up in Thessaloniki.
That's good, just to regionalise it. Thanks. Now, what we're doing is, this is not set speeches, this is a conversation. There's a few questions that were circulated, and I've allocated some first speakers just to get the conversation flowing. The first one, and I'm going to go to George on this. George, when we talk about the Greek community, την παροικία, I mean, what do we mean? I mean, what do you mean when you speak about the Greek community of Australia? I'm here, by the way.
Yeah.
You don't speak without the mic, by the way. So.
Yeah, well, the question can be answered simply or it can be answered with complexity. To me, the parikeia is anybody who regards themselves as a Greek or Greeks, and can be from first, second, third, fourth generation, because we're now really expanding into great-grandchildren and things like that of certain families, albeit very late because of particular family attitudes of doing things late. I'm now a grandfather, and I'm rather hoping to survive to see the grandchild grow up. But it is, to me, interesting that I'm now thinking in those terms. A lot of my contemporaries, in fact, have great-grandchildren, people who are older than me, because I was one of the babies of the 1930s. My parents, of course, yeah, don't look at me like that, Con. My parents are from Ithaca, and we were part of a well-established community at that time. The old Ithacan community was a closed community. But one of the key issues within it was, of course, what I call recognition. We accepted one another, we knew one another, and then as the time changed, and of course the intermarriage rate changed, we started to marry people from other islands, particularly from...
Outsiders, you mean?
The Xeni.
The barbarians.
The Xeni.
The barbarians,
Of course, I married a Kazi and was accepted as a Xeno. Thank you, Eva. But no, you see these changes. You know, I never knew Greeks from Egypt. I knew we had family in Egypt, but I'd never met a Greek from Egypt until the 1970s, when we started to see fairly significant numbers. Northern Greeks, I have no earthly idea. I knew a few Mikrasiates, but one of the interesting things was that when they heard your name, or if you spoke some Greek, the recognition factor would pull in. And to me, that is the parikeia. It's all of us that recognise one another and can relate to one another, even if we differ I mean, for example, many of us don't hit it off terribly well with the church. But the church is an institution within the parroquia. Frankly, I only go to funerals at church. But that's a significant aspect of ageing too. You go along to have the discussion as to which of us is going to die next. But all my nephews and nieces are all married, of course, so there are no weddings, although there's an occasional baptism to go to. But again, it's a question of that recognition and acceptance.
Okay.
And the question, though, that can legitimately be asked, and I think the next panel will have to deal with it, is the question of what institutions are going to survive and develop, because one of the interesting things for me is development. Community cannot remain as static as ours had for quite some time. It is changing again, thank goodness, but the question is how much we will change. But in that context, it's the institutions, it's organisations like the ones that I've belonged to over time. The Greek Orthodox community of Melbourne, Victoria, the Ithacans, the Kazis. You marry a Kazi, you marry the whole bloody island. And, so I can legitimately claim, Madam President, to be a Kazi. But the question is, what are we doing with these organisations and how will they develop? And what other organisations? I hope to hear from the ones that come later as to where we're going to recruit teachers for the teaching of Greek. Chris may well talk about Greek and good things happening, but for some of us we've seen a decline and we've seen the loss of a younger generation that one would hope would become the teaching cadres of the future.
We've got the language on
But
that.
anyway,
Let's talk about
back
that.
again,
But
recognition and institutional development becomes important.
I just wanted to probe George and ask him, because he's got tons of experience, whether in our days we should include into our parroquia the non-Greeks that are coming in. Last time I checked, beg your pardon?
Don't worry about them, they don't exist.
Yeah.
You talk to these people, all right? Not the...
Last time I checked with the Greek Orthodox Church of Australia, 1 in 2 marriages blessed by the Greek Orthodox Church are mixed marriages. Now, the last 2 censuses indicate that the out-marriage rate is increasing substantially, I would say consistently. So there is a great number of outsiders coming into our community via mixed marriages. I don't know whether the same occurs with our people marrying into other communities, but nevertheless, the question that has been bothering me for a while now, for a number of years now, is that whenever we talk about parroquia, do we include the Australians, the Chinese, the Indians, the Serbians, or any other nationality that is coming into our community via a marriage to a Greek?
Okay. Evgenia? That's right, this is not an interview for George. If you want to add to it, he'll get his turn. Yeah. Was he your teacher?
No, I'm not a teacher.
No, was he your teacher?
No, he wasn't. I think some 25 years ago I did an empirical study of doctors and lawyers in Victoria, and I prepared a very extensive questionnaire that was circulated to all of them. Strangely enough, the Greek doctors and lawyers, the response rate was about 60%. And in that questionnaire I asked them whether they considered themselves Greek, and in the questionnaire I also extended my definition of Greek to be either Greek-born or Greek parents, 1 or 2 Greek parents, a religion speaking the language, and since then I've now decided that I've extended one more to cover what you said now, Con, to extend the Philhellene, the person who becomes a Greek. And I think my late husband was one of those who wanted, Staffy Gauntlet once told him that you can't understand a Greek unless you speak Greek.
Okay.
He left it too late to speak Greek, but he made it his orama to really learn everything he could about Greek religion. He attended churches and studied the classics, and to me, someone like that is a Greek and deserves to be even more than any of us.
Okay.
Well, for me, it wasn't really an issue. My family have married out on several occasions, so having non-Greek Greek relatives was part and parcel of life. I even have an Ethiopian niece married to one of my nephews, you know, out of Athens. It's never occurred to me that one has to draw some sort of line between my aunt, who was an Australian, or my other aunt, who was probably half Turkish or something like that. You know, these were just not issues.
But things did change with the mass influx of post-war migration, didn't it?
If I can add to some of the comments that have been made, it's very difficult to come up with a definition of the Greek community that will last for a very long time. We're a dynamic community which continuously changes. We have had the characteristic of no migration in recent years, which obviously has had an effect on the way we define ourselves. And I want to pick up the point that Con made about intermarriages. Intermarriages is an issue that many of us are not aware of. We still think that Greeks marry Greeks. Well, let me tell you some stats that I'm aware of. The first generation intermarries 12% the males and 9% the females in the first generation. In the second generation, those statistics become 37% for males and 31% for females. And in the third generation, 67% of males intermarry and 61% females. So can you imagine the impact of those intermarriages? We will have amongst us as many people coming from non-Greek sort of backgrounds. So how do we define that community? And we have a tendency to say whoever marries to a Greek then becomes a Greek in some way or another. Well, that might not be the case. I think defining the Greek community is going to be an issue that will not have an easy answer.
But defining a Greek, is it language and religion?
Of course.
Or is it something more than that?
The Orthodox...
Mike says yes, you say no, we'll come to the no.
Yeah. Well, look, I think religion is an integral part of the Greek identity. Even if, like George, he turns up at funerals only and perhaps births or whatever. But it is an integral part. Now, however, we must admit that those of us who practice the Greek Orthodox faith are mainly the elderly people. If you go to a church on a Sunday, you'll find very, very few young people. So what are the implications of this? I'm not sure.
Okay, let's go. Yeah, but before that, let's see people who haven't spoken. Prohora? Christo, I want to ask you a historical question. What were the highs and the lows of the Greek community, Parikia?
Yeah, we might say that the process of the Parikia, it's not a straight line. There are always starts and beginnings and sudden stops. We might say that 1897, 98 was a starting point, and it was a new beginning.
18
idea with the creation of the communities, the first organizations in Melbourne and in Sydney.
Okay.
In 1916, it's a landmark year. Many things culminate in 1916. One is the publication of the book Ζωή in Australia, Life in Australia. It was a very optimistic book. It was written from the point of view of the successful businessmen, and they thought everyone was equally successful. It wasn't the truth, however, because we might think of Gilchrist mentions a student at the time was George Tachmidis in Sydney. And he wrote a letter, please, to King Constantine in Greece, saying that I should be appointed consul in Australia.
Yes.
Because the present consul, who wasn't Greek, of course, doesn't do anything about Greeks. And Greeks here are of two classes. It was a class society. There were the people who were the businessmen, successful businessmen, and there were the people who were working for them. There were the Ithacans or the Castelloresians, of course, successful, but there were other Castelloresians and Ithacans who they were just invited to work for those people, and they're working 60 hours a week, 6 or 7 days a week.
So it wasn't a classless parigia.
Yeah. And now, 1916 also is another point which is very important about the relations between Greeks and Australians.
Oh, we'll get to that.
A secret census took place in that year. And all Greeks all their particulars were written down. It was secret. And also not only their particulars, but also their business particulars, where they were working, if they had business, and who else working with them. And that wasn't to be used in case something went wrong with the war effort, with the Australian war effort. Anyway, we can find many changes. 1920s, of course, we know the ferry report. Some people might know about the ferry report in Queensland, which they say Greeks should not be allowed into the country because they don't make good migrants and good citizens. And 1930s, the Greeks were suffering for unemployment. It was more than the Australians. 33% were, for instance, unemployed in 1933. For the whole of Australia, it was 25%. And anyway, we know now after the it will take too much time to. I don't want to take all the time, but we can.
We'll get to that.
We can talk about mixed marriages and so on, and what happened. For instance, we know that in 1929 there were the first 7 Greeks who came to Australia.
It's all right, Chris. I want the big ones. The big turning points, the mass migration, you know, the 100,000 Greeks after the war. Now, you can't tell me that didn't change, not just the Greek community of Ithacans and Castelloresians, but also...
what I want to say about that is 3 of those Greeks remained in Australia, but none of their same descendants now are known as Greeks. That's what the point I want to make.
Now, what about on this side? Hold on, George. Kathy first. Yeah, of course.
I think that the mass migration would have been a huge turning point. That's how I see it. Post-war, after the civil war in Greece. And during that time, of course, not only do we find an influx of males coming into Australia, but also because of the assisted passage, which was mentioned before, you find a lot of females entering into Australia. And this is where I think is the big change here into the country becoming completely, not only the country being assisted, of course, by the presence of the female, but also making the community a different, giving it a different flavour. And of course here we come into the picture of the 50s and the 60s of where you have this huge influx of these people that not only did they come from the rural areas, but you do have some other groups that were disenfranchised with the respective governments. And so there were some educated Greeks that came during that time as well. And both male and female, more male perhaps in this case. So there is that turning point, I think, during that time for the parroquia, which is starting to flourish and is starting to become very, very prominent. And these are the foundations, I would say, in some ways, although, of course, the foundations were laid even before and by the previous, like the Ethicians and the Castelloresians. But I think that the foundations of what we see today, in some ways, was laid during the 50s and the 60s by all the mass migration that came. Are we still sticking to that point, or do you want to go on to another one?
No.
Yeah?
The other point that the other point that I wanted us to move on to is how did non-Greek Australians perceive Greeks? And at one, not just Anglo-Australians, of course, but also non-Greek, non-Anglo, other ethnic and religious minority groups. How was the relationship through the White Australia period, for example, and then post-war in the 50s and 60s, and because it wasn't always fun and cool to be Greeks, you know, it was a time that it was frowned upon.
Yeah, well, the White Australia policy only just stopped not many years ago, as we know, and it was a policy whereby it was by the British. It was to exclude the non-white race, although in this case a lot of other people, I think Andoni mentioned something of that nature too, came into the picture as well, and so the Dago or the Wog was part and parcel of what they had to live with. And I think in what I'm coming to understand is that each respective minority group that existed and a new one that came in, they hated that. They were threatened by it and they didn't like it. So perhaps the Italians that would have been more established here before the Greeks did, they perhaps, I don't know, I mean, I'm not part of the Italian community, but maybe felt threatened by that too, because there's a new incoming migrant coming into the picture, taking jobs, taking, you know, spreading their wings in a society. But certainly I think that the Greeks certainly had a hard time, and so did other minority groups.
Yeah, but I want to see what we're trying to get at, how do Greeks perceive that treatment? Was there a propensity to integrate more, to become more anglicised? At some point, of course, the community becomes insulated, internally creating its own world, you know, having its own infrastructure, its own newspapers, its own schools, its own social space, where they reinforced their Greekness or their brand of Greekness. And I mean, this is how the interaction is not, especially in times where there was isolation, the 50s and the 60s, where there was that cultural isolation. Of course you can.
Now, for my sociology degree, now my thesis was...
Where did you do it, sorry?
Deakin.
Okay.
Now,
couldn't get into
the thesis was, the thesis was migrants in the union movement. Now, that was an eye-opener. What we found out then with my fellow student who did the major research project as part of our thesis was that Greeks felt threatened even in the 70s, beginnings of the 80s. An established community felt threatened at the time simply because not many of them could master the English language. They felt at the time that the unions did help but not enough in order to protect them from the racial and other attacks that they were experiencing at the shop floor. And then came the famous Cura report, entitled, "I wouldn't like my wife to work there." You've got it good on you, Eugenie. So that report was absolutely damning of the way and manner Australian employees were treating employers of migrant backgrounds. But even earlier than that, John Wheelwright, in his books, Essays in Australian Capitalism, where he dedicates a number of chapters to migration to Australia and how migrants were treated as workers and as people generally. Now, that is also proving that the times were hard, not only for the Greeks, but all migrants. And then we've got Bonegilla, the other testament. Now, you don't have to speak to Giovanni Gro or Frank Arena. I did speak to the late Plutarcho Deligani, a person we all know in the community, and a number of other Greeks as part of a series of articles I did in Neos Cosmos about Bonegilla. I mean, some people have tried to beautify Bonegilla, but Bonegilla, as far as I'm concerned, was hell for 90% of the migrants. And to get to the point that you've asked us to touch together with Raina, I'll say that as part of another research project, I have found that Cypriots in the post-war migration era were more favourably treated by the Australian establishment than the rest of the Greeks that have come to Australia. Because exactly right, because they were members of the Commonwealth. While the Greeks from mainland Greece were sent to Bonegilla, the Cypriots were kept here at Meribinon, at one of the migration centres. Now, Greeks from Egypt and other parts of Middle East, because they were bilingual, they had skills, they were also treated differently. We had some people, some Pontians from Russia or Asia Minor. Now, these people, unfortunately, have fallen into the same category than the rest of us that have come to Australia during the post-war era, irrespective of whether we came through assisted package or we paid our way to Australia or whatever. So I would say that people were treated differently depending on the level of their education, on the skills they brought across, and their expectations. So if I use my personal experience, I came to Australia, first time I worked in a factory, I made a major accident, and I went to the court. Galbali was my defense lawyer because I knew him from the Aspida case in Greece when Andreas Papandreou and the Aspida case. I'm not going to go to
Leave that.
And I was thrown out of the court because I resisted the determination made by the court when the judge said to me, "I'm sorry, if you cut your arms from up here, we would have compensated you for $4,000. If you cut it from the elbow down, $2,000. Now that you cut it here, you will get $1,100. I told him where to stick the money, so he threw me out. Nevertheless, I mean, all those were experiences that have, I'll say, have left some indelible marks into the psyche of not only the Greek-Australian migrant, but any other migrant that was treated in the same way and manner. So, to wrap, it doesn't matter whether you're Greek, Italian or Chinese, and I think if this kind of discussions are to continue, I think it will be to our advantage if we invite other nationalities to cite their experiences as well.
Thanks, Costa.
Στο διάλογο, μια και είναι ελληνικός.
Ναι.
Θέλω να πω ότι πολλά από αυτά που ακούστηκαν είναι αλήθεια. Μετά όμως, από τον καιρό που ήρθα εγώ, το 1966, και μετά είδα τους ανθρώπους οι οποίοι πραγματικά είχαν πρόβλημα.
Ρένα, θα καθίσει πίσω σου εδώ, Νίκος.
για να επιβιώσουν αυτοί που δεν είχαν οπωσδήποτε τη μόρφωση. Υπήρχε μια διαφορά, πολύ σωστά είπε ο κύριος Νικολόπουλος εδώ, ότι όντως οι άνθρωποι που ήρθαν από την Αίγυπτο και πολλοί από την Κωνσταντινούπολη ήταν δίγλωσσοι και αυτό είχε μια διαφορά. Υπήρχε όμως...
Yeah, sorry. Rena is alluding to the fact that she's agreeing with the panel discussion that immigrants were treated differently in all sorts of areas and all sorts of spheres.
Συγγνώμη που τα λέω ελληνικά, αλλά εγώ επιμένω ελληνικά.
Not a problem.
Γιατί δεν μπορεί να λέμε ότι είναι ο διάλογος έτσι. Τώρα υπάρχουν βέβαια και οι συμπολίτες μας εδώ που μιλάνε την αγγλική. Ναι, το ξέρω. Επιμένω. Λοιπόν, το θέμα είναι ότι οι άνθρωποι αυτοί που πραγματικά δεν είχαν τη γνώση ή δεν μπορούσαν να καταλάβουν ούτε μία λέξη, γιατί να θυμίσουμε ότι οι περισσότεροι από αυτούς ούτε διάβαζαν, ούτε μπορούσαν να βάλουν την υπογραφή τους. Έβαζαν σταυρό. Άλλοι έβαζαν το αποτύπωμα, το δακτυλικό αποτύπωμα. Αυτούς τους ανθρώπους γνώρισα εγώ και έτσι αγάπησα την Αυστραλία και έμεινα. Δεν είδα παράπονο, δεν είδα όμως αυτή την τάση να πούνε ότι δεν θέλουμε αυτούς ή εκείνο. Εκείνο το πρόβλημα που υπήρχε, συγγνώμη Νίκο, πες.
Rena's experiences were with the immigrants in Australia who were not educated. Those who, for example, had to sign their name via a cross. She worked with and was in a community who weren't necessarily complaining about their lack of opportunity, but were embracing certain aspects. And that is one of the reasons why she chose to stay in Australia.
Είχαν όμως πολύ κουράγιο, είχαν πολύ πίστη σε αυτό, ήθελαν να δημιουργήσουν και για μένα, γι' αυτό αγάπησα την Αυστραλία και έμεινα και την παροικία, γιατί για μένα αυτοί είναι οι ήρωες. Ο Καραϊσκάκης και ο Κολοκοντρώνης και όλοι αυτοί ήξεραν ποιος είναι ο εχθρός τους. Αυτοί ήρθαν σε μια χώρα χωρίς να ξέρουν τίποτα, χωρίς να την έχουν δει ούτε στο χάρτη, άκουσαν κάποια πολύ ωραία λόγια και όλοι προσπάθησαν. Εκείνο που έχει σημασία είναι ότι το πρόβλημά τους ήταν, ναι, ότι είχε μείνει από τα παλιά η λέξη walk, μεταφέρθηκε σε μερικά από τα παιδιά τους που τους πίκραινε αυτό, και ίσως να ήταν και αυτός ο λόγος που έλεγαν, ας πούμε... Σταματάω.
Όχι, να μην σταματήσετε. But to give justice to what Rena is saying, I'll just stop you there for a moment. The true migrant experience that Rena is stating was through those individuals who came to Australia and worked hard and toiled all of these years and did so with the aspect of developing a better life and a better environment and community. It's those people that she met, it's those people who were the true heroes, and it's those people that led to her, again, loving and choosing to stay in Australia.
Πολλά παιδιά είχαν το πρόβλημα ότι στο σχολείο είχαν το πρόβλημα το ότι τους έλεγαν walk, τους απέφευγαν κτλ. Και αυτό πίκραινε τους γονείς οι οποίοι δεν είχαν τη μόρφωση. Γι' αυτό ήταν και ο λόγος που έλεγαν στα παιδιά τους να παντρευτείς Έλληνα ή Ελληνίδα, να μιλάς ελληνικά, δεν θέλω στο σπίτι να μου φέρνεις ξένους, τους έλεγαν κτλ. Όμως, αγωνίστηκαν όταν είχαν έναν άνθρωπο να μιλήσουν και όταν είχαν κάποιους ανθρώπους, είτε ήταν μέσα από την κοινότητα, είτε ήταν αργότερα όταν δημιουργήθηκε η πρόνοια, είτε κάποιοι μέσω της Εκκλησίας, μέσω του συλλόγου τους. Φυσικά να πούμε εδώ, να κάνω μια παρένθεση, ότι υπήρξαν και άνθρωποι...
Ναι, ναι.
Ναι, το θέμα είναι ότι δεν θα θυμάμαι τι λέω.
While Rena collects her thoughts, and she's doing so beautifully,
before she loses the microphone,
the migrant experience, I guess, in the Greek community wasn't so much one of exclusion, where parents encouraged their children to marry within the Greek community to the extent or to the expense of excluding others from that community, but it was a result of the shared experiences that they had and their willingness to want to communicate with people who were Greek, and also Rena states that it was not by chance that when Greek members of the community met other Greeks or saw that their family members were marrying into the Greek community, that their levels of excitement and engagement increased.
Και για να είμαστε και ειλικρινείς, υπήρξαν και άνθρωποι οι οποίοι γνώριζαν τη γλώσσα την αγγλική και εκμεταλλεύτηκαν πάρα πολύ άσχημα, και αυτό ήταν μια πίκρα και ένα αγκάθι πολύ μεγάλο στους Έλληνες εδώ. Όσο για τη γυναίκα, νομίζω ότι κράτησαν την παροικία, χωρίς να θέλω να προσβάλλω το αρσενικό φύλλο, αλλά ήταν οι γυναίκες οι οποίες διατήρησαν τη γλώσσα, τη θρησκεία, τα ήθη, τα έθιμα, και που επέμεναν περισσότερο από τον μπαμπά, άσχετα αν φαινόταν ο μπαμπούλας, ο μπαμπάς.
Finally, Rena makes the point that it was the ladies, the females of the community.
The women.
The women, rather. Indeed. Yes, all three describing the women. Thank you, Michali.
You're welcome.
Our gender expert, thank you. It was the women, or the ladies, within the family unit that encouraged and allowed the Greek culture to prosper. Not again at the expense of the males in the community, but were the ones that were spending the majority of the time. And to close, and to give Irena the justice that her comments deserve, finally, she also noted that there were aspects not only of battle in that trying to maintain a community and an identity, Greek identity, but there were even Greeks themselves who took advantage of the fact that there were members of the Greek community that weren't as knowing or as educated as they were.
Thanks, Nick. And because time is of the essence, our biggest nemesis, Kyriako, I want you, if you could respond to how Greeks, Australians, see the homeland, την πατρίδα, την Ελλάδα, την Κύπρο, όποια και αν είναι. Ακριβώς, ποια πατρίδα, όποια και αν είναι αυτή η πατρίδα. Whatever is the homeland.
Michael, that's fine. But could I just make a comment on
now you've got the mic and you've been
what's
very
being
patient.
discussed at the moment? I think that when we are discussing the future of a minority group within a larger community, society, we should always do it in relation to the wider community. The Greek community, I see it in 2 or 3 generations, that it will be part of the wider community, and it will be incorrect to be referring to a Greek community other than organizations such as the Greek Orthodox community, but by and large, as members of the wider Australian community, we are going to be known as Australians. It is, I think we have been influenced by communities that survived, Greek communities that survived in countries very much different from Australia, such as in Asia Minor, in Turkey. There were Greek communities there that survived with language and religion for some 2,500 years until the exchange of populations in 1922-23. In Pontus, the Greek community was there since the 7th century before Christ. Along the coastline of Asia Minor, the Greek communities were established in the 11th and the 10th centuries BC, and yet they were distinctly Greek. Why? Because the wider community was not the type of Australia or the United States, which by their civilization, by their way of life, easily absorb minority groups. And therefore the Greek community within Australia will not have a different future to the Greek community in the United States. So in 2 or 3 generations, I think we will be exactly like the Greek Americans, but they only by name Greek
that's
Americans.
What he's saying. Okay. That's right. No. That's right. That's his view. That in 2-3 generations, it'll be totally assimilated. Yvonne hasn't spoken.
Yvonne, sorry.
Yvonne.
I'm interested in a comment made about the migrants that came in the 50s who were not supported by the earlier Greeks. There seems to be an underlying thread here that there was distinction between the early Greeks and the ones that arrived in the 50s and the 60s. Mm-hmm. The interesting thing is, if you read books like Weevils in the Flower, if you read books like Power Without Glory, you will know that to survive, simply to survive in the early 10s, 20s and 30s was an amazing feat. The Greeks that came, not only did they not have any linguistic skills, some of them couldn't write, they had to be registered as national aliens because it was feared that they might be Italians or they might be Albanians or something. And then we had the First World War. So there was a fear of that, and some soldiers, Greek people, went and fought in Gallipoli and in other places as well. After that, it was followed by the Depression. It was extremely hard, not just for the Greeks, but for everybody else as well. There was no social security. There were no free English classes. There was nothing to support those people. And that then was followed by the Second World War. So those people who were here then, I'm not saying that the Greeks who came later didn't find it difficult. I do think they did. But to deny or to not recognise the difficulties faced in the early years, I think, is perhaps glossing over things a little too readily. What I do recall as a child is that the Greek community in the early years was harmonious. They stuck together like mud because they needed each other. They gave each other jobs. They helped bring people out from overseas. They did a number of things and were most community-minded. However, in the 50s, it seems to me, and I may be throwing a spanner in the works here, Michalis, it seems to me that
we want spanners.
After the civil war in Greece, it seemed to me a lot of those tensions were transported to Australia and continued on here, much to the detriment of the later Greeks that came. So I think that was very damaging. I don't know that we've actually survived that, in a sense. Okay?
Thank you. Now, there's a reason why Andonis has got the bell, to keep us in line. We've way past our time. I've got a minute for comment.
Can I just make a comment about the age?
Sorry?
Age to the community organisations. Is it going to be mentioned?
Yes, the age thing is mentioned, yes, and we're not here to advertise anything. We're here to speak from our own experiences about these issues, but we haven't spoken about, I know we haven't touched about relationship with the homeland, but maybe that's something for the second dialogue. We do have a second dialogue programmed to look at the Greek crisis and the impact of the Greek crisis on the Greek Australian community, and I think that would fit much better the question of homeland and the relationship.
You did ask the question as to whether our future identity, what is likely to be.
No, that's for them. Yeah, you're the past, not you personally, but therefore to deal with the future identity. So don't go to the future too much. Stay at the present and look at backwards. They all deal with the Greek identity and what it means. So let's not take... Yes, Evgenia, you're the last one.
Okay, thank you. I've got a contrary view about everybody's comments in relation to...
Closer. Is it?
Discrimination.
Oh.
I think that everybody discriminates. The Greeks discriminate. The Greeks here discriminate. The very fact that we call Australians xengi in their own homeland is discriminatory by us. The Greeks in Greece discriminate about all the new migrants that they've got. They discriminate against the Albanians and all the blacks. And I can only go back to an article when I was interviewed in The Age in the 70s. And I said, and the article was how Greeks discriminate, because the article made news. But if you read into the article, I went on to say, we all discriminate. And the way I overcame this, and I think I came out positive, and I don't think I've ever complained about any discrimination, and I think we can all learn and be positive about it. When I was a very young child and was rubbing talcum powder on my legs to make myself lighter like the other little girls.
Okay.
And being called a dago, and I was teacher's pet. I thought I'd go and complain to my teacher about them calling me a dago. And what happened is something that your teacher, Yvonne, was amazing. I was his pet, and I know I was his pet. Yet he grabbed his ruler and he whacked me over the calf with his ruler, and I was then enrolled at school as Janie. You get the Jenny. And he said, Janie, don't tell tales. And by that, I took it that he said to me, you're better than them, raise yourself above it. And ever since that comment was made, I switched my name to Eugenia, so you don't. And I really thought, forget about that, sticks and stones won't, and decided to make it a positive and not complain. And I think all of us here tonight and in the last 40 years, George, around welfare, we sat there, everybody complaining about discrimination, and I think that was a negative complaint. We could have used it to as a positive and got more out of it.
Just to fill in that little bit of history, Dennis Gabriel and I used to sing the old rock song, Jenny, Jenny, won't you come along with me? At Jenny, to get rid of her, get her out of our hair.
Thank you. We thank the first circle. Please be seated. Now we're going to have a changeover. A round of applause for them. I know I didn't do them justice. Next time we won't go for 9, we'll go for 5. Now, second, the new perspectives. Elade, μην αντρέπεστε. Vayo, come on. Just quickly, just announce the name.
The second circle, Vaios Anastasopoulos, radio producer, Deem Kalimnio, solicitor, writer and columnist, Evgenia Pavlopoulou, journalist and online editor, Neos Cosmos, Bill Papasteriadis, lawyer and president of Greek community of Melbourne, Joy Damousi, professor of history at Melbourne University, Costa Karamarkou, journalist and editor, Yana Vithulkas, former union official and freelance writer, and Daniel Bellis, representing the Greek Orthodox, the Archiepiscopi, and Tas Tsgardelis, the president of the National Union of Greek Australian Students, NUGAS.
Thank you, Nick. Now, of course, nobody's representing anybody. They're here in the individual capacity, so don't think what is my Δυτικό Συμβούλιο going to say if I say something of a policy nature. So just liberate yourself. Exercise την Archiepiscopi. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about your Συμβούλιο, editorial committees, whatever. Okay. Now, some of the questions. This is gone. The first question is, what does a Greek identity mean? And what it will mean in the future. Somebody wanted to broach that, but I cut them off, so let's start with that question. Who did I have first? Oh, Joy. Yes, you, Professor of History.
Thank you. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me here. It's a great privilege to be sitting here, in particular with the younger group. I especially like that and appreciate that, Michalis. Thank you. With the Neolea. Yeah, with the Neolea, that's a wonderful thing. Greek identity. I'm going to really put a spanner in the works here because I want to raise an idea about where the Greek identity is today, and our very learned and erudite panel before us raised this. But I want to take the conversation in a slightly different direction, and I want to talk a little bit about a revolution that's happening with us, amongst us, and will continue to happen, and that is the influence of the internet. And the influence of the internet for the diaspora, both, Greek Australians, Greek Canadians, Greek Americans, the Greek diaspora in the fullest sense of the word. And when we talk about Greek identity, I don't think today or in the future we can talk about Greek identity without thinking about social media. And I think this pertains to the second and the third generation in particular, because what I have seen and what I've experienced firsthand is how for those generations, the internet is serving a very specific and unique purpose, and I think will continue to do so. And I say that in terms of connection with Greeks worldwide, connection with Greeks from their family village, in ways that I could never have imagined growing up myself. And we're seeing the development of an identity through social media, which I think is really where the future is going. And I would say that internally within Australia as well. I think we have to look at what is defining that identity through technology, which is new and present and wasn't there certainly when I was growing up. I don't know about others here, but I think that's a really powerful framework through which I think we need to talk about the future, because I think that's going to define it.
But does that presume that the old institutions will either succumb or be replaced, and we lock ourselves in our rooms with our laptops or virtual communication, and somehow through this interchange identities get formed? I mean, this is what...
I think it's going to be like with anything with the internet. I think my view is it's going to be the old and the new. There'll be hard, interface, face-to-face, but I think the internet is going to really transform some of the institutions that we have today, as it has done already in other facets of life. And I think that can be a very, very positive thing. I'm not making a judgment about it, whether it's a good or bad thing.
Yeah, of course.
But
I want you to make a judgment.
When you're asking me about...
I want you to make a judgment.
Well, I guess some of this stuff is the future, so, how do any of us know anything about what will be? But I think some of the current institutions that you're talking about will change because of the power of the internet, and I think that can be a very, very empowering and positive aspect, particularly for how we understand Greekness and its place in the world. And like with anything, there are losses, but my view is there'll probably be a mixture of the two. I don't think we'll completely become digitised, but I do think that that's going to be an influence.
Okay. Now, Kyriakos mentioned a couple of generations, the Greek entity is going to disappear because the language is going to go. Is that right, Kyriakos? That's what, that's a good point to respond to. And I'm going to Vaios.
Thank you. Well, it's very interesting, Michaeli, that you are asking me about this, because I'm a third-generation Greek Australian, probably with the strongest Greek accent in Australia.
Sorry, we didn't do the round to get your migration DNA. So
but in any case, yes, I can say
there
that...
There are assumptions here and presumptions.
Look, my grandfather came to Australia before the Second World War. My mother was born here, so I'm a third-generation Greek-Australian, but I was born in Greece. And I think only the fact that you are asking me about the Greek language, with my strong, big, fat Zorba accent, it's a statement by itself.
Yes.
I think it's a characteristic of the dynamic community that we live in. The Greek language will always be present within the Greek community. We use it in the churches, we use it within the family. We all want to go for holidays in Greece, to enjoy the Greek summer in Santorini, in Mykonos, in Thessaloniki, where I come from. So I do the same with my kids. I've got 2 kids, and every Saturday morning, my daughter asks me, Baba, why do I have to go to the Greek school? And I have to come up every week with a different answer, but it doesn't work. She still has come back to me. And
because if you don't go, Greekness is going to die, according to Kyriakos.
Look, I used many different arguments, but I ended up by saying that because you have to go. And actually, that works.
Okay.
If you know what I mean. So, to answer your question, yes, Greek language, it is important for our identity, but it can't be a precondition, to identify yourself with a community. We all have cases, we all know people who discover their Greekness, after 2, 3 generations. And they want to find out more about their history, about their Hellenism. And they do not speak Greek. It is important, Greek language, and everyone agrees on this, it's a treasure, but we cannot really put it as a precondition for somebody to feel Greek.
Okay.
Just as a
So Greekness
proposal.
goes through religion then? Daniel, does it go through the church, Greekness? I mean, the indicators are the Greek language, the usage of it, let's see, is declining. In schools, the Greek media, Neos Cosmos now brings out its Neos Cosmos English edition, not a supplement that it used to be. Now it's taken over the whole Saturday. Well, now Lada's gone, now it's Neos Cosmos English edition. Isn't that right? Services are in English now, there's an increase on that?
There certainly is. It will become more apparent that each Greek Orthodox church in the future will be bilingual. There's a push, particularly in other states, for English-speaking only parishes, but with a new generation of Australian-born and Australian-trained in our Greek Orthodox Theological College in Sydney priests, parishes will be bilingual. The second point that I wanted to make, that the Orthodox faith isn't dependent upon a language, and the most famous example historically is the translation of the Orthodox faith into Slavonic through the missionary saints, Saint Cyril and Methodios, who took the gospel of Christ, originally communicated in Greek, to the Slavic people. And so I'll keep my answer brief.
That's right, thank you. I was interviewed by an SBS journalist, and because of her Greek surname, I assumed she was from the Greek program. And she asked me, I don't think she did it capriciously, but more naively, is that why do the Greeks need to dialogue? Haven't they successfully integrated into Australia? So is the question of identity, and I'm going to Dean, because again, he's in my eyesight. What do you have to say about Greek identity?
I think that
and
having dealt with a lot of communities and having married into a different community, we have a very distinct ontopathology, if I can use the term, about being Greek, an obsession about our identity that other nationalities perhaps don't have.
You're sure?
We are constantly...
It's not just a Greek thing, is it?
I think we have it in pronounced form. We are constantly trying to define ourselves, exclude ourselves, explore the parameters of ourselves, not only here, but in Greece, and it's always been this way ever since Herodotus. And we try and exclude others from the Olympic game in ancient times on the basis of their Hellenism or non-Hellenism, and we're the same. You have various forms of Hellenism being pervaded within the second generation, the third generation these days. There are the ultra-nationalistic ones that talk about the pureness of the purity of the Greek blood, unfortunately. You have the ones that talk about anyone who espouses the Orthodox religion cannot be Greek, for Greek civilization reached its apogee during the ancient times, and we espouse these ideals. Others talk about the campaigns for social justice as something that defines the true Greek, whereas others who may be against certain political groups as belonging to the Dark Ages. Others who believe that the church is intrinsically linked to the Greek identity. So there are all these multiplicity of identities. We could argue that they all form part of a whole, or we can argue that there is no such thing as a Greek identity. It is a construct that we create in order for us to be able to relate to each other.
Thanks, Dean. Now I'm going to Gina now, because I saw you nodding your head.
I think this is really interesting, and I want to follow on from what Dean and Joy both said, that we're having this discussion in Melbourne, and so I want to say that even within Australia there are different Greek-Australian identities, and I experienced this firsthand when I went to live in Perth in 1994. I didn't actively seek out Greeks. I sort of came across somebody who said, you know, come along to a function, and I met all these people who were really old and really conservative. They were all Liberal voters, and, you know, I wanted to talk about, you know, at the time there was a lot of discussion about native title, and I wanted to engage on those issues with people, you know, and they had absolutely no interest, and they were really religious. They all identified around the church. And that was so completely different from my own experience as a Greek Australian. I wanted to hang out with other people my age, listen to Greek music, talk politics, you know, smoke a joint. And, you know, none of these people were interested in this stuff. So I couldn't relate to them at all. And they were Greek Australians. So I think it is a construct, and I think there are different constructs that we make ourselves and that other people make for us. And I just want to add one other thing. My son, his father's Italian, and he says to me one day, about 6 months ago, "Mum, all the Greeks that you know and that I meet are always hassling me about being Greek, about being more Greek, and they're always putting the Italians down. And nobody on the Italian side does this." So I agree with Dean. We do have an obsession about our identity that perhaps other minorities don't have. And I think it's born from insecurity, and it's probably born from historical factors as well. And you know, I often say to people that the Greek identity isn't dependent on a nation state and has survived before and after the creation of the nation state, which is Greek. And I use the ancient Greek definition of what a Greek is as my reason for sending my son to Greek school, which he hated, and I now have a teacher who comes at home, otherwise he just wouldn't do it. So, yeah, I think, you know, even when we talk about a Greek identity, what is it? I think the internet's got a lot to... he's going to play a big role in how it evolves, and I think that I can only speak anecdotally, and in my preparation for coming here tonight was actually talking to my son. I said to him, you know, what does having a Greek heritage mean to you? Oh, lots of things. I said, really, what? You know? And I was really shocked by his answers. Like, you know, he feels that his life is completely different from non-Greeks. These are kids his age, he's 14. He feels that Greece is his ancestral home, as he does Italy. He's been there lots of times because my parents live there, so we go there quite a bit. So his responses were very interesting for me because I really believed that he was not interested in this stuff, that he didn't really identify as Greek, and that really played not much of a role in who he was and what he considered important. And I like to think that I didn't really, you know, impose it on him, except for learning Greek. I said to him, look, when you're 20 years old and you're on a beach in Santorini and a beautiful Greek girl goes past, you're going to thank me that I sent you to Greek school.
Thank you. Now you touched upon different Greeks from different states and Greek Melburnian, you know, with that sort of era. And I want to go to Tas now. Now, Tas, you come into contact as Nugis with Greeks from all states. Do you depict any variations? Are Greek Melburnians different, you know? Greeks from Sydney? And in what way?
It's funny you say that because our last convention was in Darwin.
Darwin.
And that was a bit of a shock. In terms of, you didn't even notice there's so many Greeks in Australia and they're so different no matter where you go. Even Greeks in Sydney, they think they're very different to Greeks in Melbourne. And then you've got people from WA who a lot of people we interacted with didn't know Greek as well. And it just goes to show that what unites us and what gives us our Greek identity, not necessarily language, not necessarily religion, not necessarily what Choreo we came from, what village our parents came from even. It's becoming much broader now. And I guess that's the huge transition at the moment that we're seeing. And something like Nugis tries to bring all these people together through the commonality of being Greek and that pride, I guess, of our history and our ancestry, but and how we can use that to benefit us.
So how are we different from the Greeks of Sydney? You're not running for national president, are you? Are you? How are they different?
How are they different?
And I herald from Sydney, so
here we go.
Keep that in mind.
Well, they're all fantastic people.
Oh, yeah. Of course they are. Of course they are.
a lot of them...
Melburnians arrogant, you know, and they think they're really at the source of Greekness.
Well, many perceive that. Many perceive us as more even traditional, more... we know Greek dancing better, we know the Greek language better. You know, they consider us more Greek in some regard. So I find that very interesting because you don't realise that until you speak to other people because, you know, it's a very... You don't experience that unless you travel in the state. So I found that very interesting.
Thanks, Daz. Now I'm going to go to... I'll come to you. We've got Evgenia, brother. Then we'll go to Costa. Bill.
I want to speak from my personal kind of experience in terms of bringing up a 21 and a 10-year-old. One of them was born in Greece and the other one came here at the age of 2. And then from my own personal experience working with Greek Australians for about 15 years now through News Cosmos and other media. And I totally agree with Dean about this fabulous Greek identity which we all try to define and apparently we can't catch it because it changes every single day, even if we have an idea in our head. And I'm talking about my 21-year-old who I took away from Greek schools, actually. I made an informed decision to take him to Catholic schools. Mm-hmm. And I gave him the space to actually research religion or experience spirituality whichever way he wanted to. And I never said to him, you know, you have to become a Greek Orthodox or this or that. And he was never taught religion in school. And I believe that it's neither language and it's neither church, especially the way that the church is. I'm sorry, but it's a very austere and old institution which has to change, especially with technology coming in and basically challenging it a great deal of way. And I believe technology is a very positive advent. I mean, I can see my son right now speaking with people in Greece via his Facebook account and coming up and basically telling me that he's got friends in Greece and speaking with them and giving me new words and new language and feeling so into that environment, I would say, sometimes. I just get amazed to the point where actually he's not here tonight. I'm spying on his Facebook account to see what the hell is going on.
That's very healthy.
Yeah, I know. So I think that the Greek Orthodox religion, or if I'll put it another way, the church has to realize that if it wants to be relevant to this third or fourth generation, has to look at the generation that they have to speak to. I went to the church a couple of weeks ago, and even if it was in English, I thought, these people are speaking to an audience of, I don't know, 80-year-olds? And there were not a lot of 80-year-olds in that audience, I'm telling you. Or which world are they living in?
Taking notes here, Daniel?
Yeah, so, and from my experience in the social life, I know atheists who feel they identify as Greeks and say, you know what, I'm Greek. And I know people who don't speak the Greek language and they go searching about, philosophy, but they still identify as Greeks. And I know Irish people who come up to me and they're dear friends of mine and they say that I should be Greek. I really enjoy this culture. So, and I take it from the point of Kostas Nikolopoulos before, like what we regard as the Greek community here, which I believe they are the non-Greeks as well, those people who actually become part of this culture and enjoy it.
Thank you, Virginia. I'll give it to Bill. Now, Bill, my question to you is that, of course, the Greek community, the organised Greek community, all right, the institutions, etc., served a purpose. There was a need for them. Okay, there was a need, either because they were isolated, discriminated, and they had to set up their own institutions, the churches, the schools, etc. Is there really a need for these institutions? And there's about 200, I think, from 200 Greek Victorian, organisations, all right? And they've got their own committees, they're all middle-aged men, old men. So there's a crisis there because nobody's stepping in for that volunteerism. And some of these have assets of millions of dollars. I mean, that's an issue in itself. How do you see it going? What institutions do you think will be, Greek institutions, the Greek Melbourne institution will be around 5, 10, 15 years, social media aside?
Okay. There's quite a few questions there.
I know.
I counted at least 15.
You are the president of the Greek Orthodox
It's not actually a
Melbourne
dialogue, it's a question
Victoria,
time.
And a lawyer.
He's an academic, of course.
So is his brother.
I'll try and answer each one of them succinctly.
Or none of them.
The first question, as I understood it, was that there are a lot of organisations, and that is true. As the president of the Greek community of Melbourne, the Greek Orthodox community of Melbourne, I get invited to maybe 3 or 4 events a week. And so I'm probably one of the few people, say for the Consul General and maybe John Pandazopoulos and a few others, who maybe goes to 50 to 100 events of various community groups annually. What strikes me is a few things. Firstly, some of them have embraced change. Some of them, and I should say a minority, in fact have a board which consists of people of 2nd and 3rd generation. That is a minority. All of them want intergenerational change. They all seek it. Many of them are unable to talk the language that is required to effect that change. And the other thing that I observe is that these institutions and organisations and their buildings are sacred to them.
Yes.
Are sacred to them because for them it's part of their identification and their meaning, because most of them were set up, as we all would know in here, based on regionality. In other words, they arrived from some part of Greece, they found people from that same part of Greece who lived in Melbourne, and they then began to relate and socialise with them. And in fact, it's interesting to note that sociological studies done in Athens reveal that Athens itself is based very much on a regional basis, that people from various parts of Greece have congregated and lived in various suburbs, and in that way have a strong identification with their particular village, because they can walk to areas where villagers from the past also live in the same area. So there is no doubt an ageing of our Greek community in terms of its current organisational structure. 80% of the organisations will not have 2nd and 3rd generation Greeks on their boards of management.
What would that mean?
What does that mean?
Yes.
It means that, and they will admit it themselves, that in 10 to 20
Don't
years...
worry about them.
10 to 20
Bill,
years,
what's the bill?
you will see... there's no science to this,
no, of course
but
not.
you'll see that maybe 70% of the organisations may not exist. Some of them are in fact now putting in place changes to their constitutions to effect a change in their asset ownership, such that the ownership of the asset will pass to some other organisation when the board ceases to exist. At the moment...
The church and the Giginoida?
No, Frodida, Australian Greek Welfare, and you know, so there are a number of organisations that they're pointing their direction towards, which I think is quite helpful. That one of the things that we face is that because it's sacred to them, their places of meeting, people who they invite there, and for the purpose of having a discussion about generational change, they look for 2 things that I find. Firstly, are the people that they're talking to committed to a community? They look for commitment to a community. In other words, what is your background? How have you participated? Do you want to continue to participate? That's the first question that I find interesting. The second thing is they also want some relationship back. In other words, if we give you something, we'd like something back in return. In other words, you don't turn up with don't turn up offering something which doesn't involve contribution by them in the future or a place for them to meet. They require something back in return. And I don't think that's a terrible thing. I think it's an appropriate thing for them.
Okay. I want to go to Gostas because he's been very patient here. Take your pick, Costa. Identity, assets,
I think,
internet.
Identity and the rest. I think it makes historical, it makes
Yes, Gina. I'm glad to see you again.
It's the white hair through you.
I think it makes sense historically, psychoanalytically, politically to be insecure. Whether we're talking about the Greeks in Greece or whether we're talking about Australians of Greek extraction. And let us not forget, it is important, I'm not a separatist, but it is important, even today, when we all glorify Australian multiculturalism, even today, the gates and the corridors of power are defined in terms of ethnicity, in terms of class, and so on and so forth. So, insecurity, it makes sense to be insecure about your identity. Another point that I want to make is that I am of the impression that over the last 10-15 years, we tend to express various aspects of our Greekness in the private sphere rather than in the public sphere. Once upon a time, in the 70s, in the 80s, the Greek-Australian voice, through alliances, was much more visible, and if we are to talk about a collective identity, if we are to talk about a community, we have to talk about public space, we have to talk about the public sphere and public engagement. I'm not of the opinion that we're all that visible today in the wider debate and in the wider community, and that is of some importance, and I think it's something worth taking it up and discussing it, whether or not that private and public split affects our presence.
Costa, why do you think that's so? Is it because now the Greeks are more confident and more secure, they don't need to assert themselves or remind others of their Greekness?
Historical and circumstances have led the community to a point where more or less through what the old-timers used to say, false consciousness, some people might think they can manage on their own. I don't think that is the case. Let us just make that footnote and we can continue the discussion later on. And somehow, if we are to have some input in the wider Australian community or in the Hellenic world, it will be helpful if we make certain definitions of Greekness part of the greater mosaic that defines us as people. I mean, okay, Greek in terms of gender, Greek in terms of sexuality, Greek in terms of ideology. We can all fit and find identifiers. That's all.
Thank you. Thank you. Dean's been very patient.
I just wanted to make a point which ties in a bit of what Gina said, a bit of what Bill said, and a bit of what Tass said. There is a big problem with regard to the existing structures, and this is because whereas the first generation thinks in terms of communal and volunteerism, as Michalis stated, second, third generations, which are more simulated, have been subsumed into the broader zeitgeist. They're more individualistic. The idea of relating to each other on the basis of race or religion alone needs to be rethought, and it is significant to note that the only institution that exists in our community, in inverted commas, which is autonomous of first-generation created organisations, is NUGAS. It's the only one. And it largely exists outside the organised Greek community, is left to its own devices doing what it does, and it's on the periphery. It's not integrated. The other organisations do not relate to it as much as they do amongst themselves. It is separate and autonomous. The other organisations that are putting in succession plans, and I've served on boards of some of them, are basically, even when they have second, third generation people, right now their focus is still on first generation aspirations and regionalism. And this is where I want to say something about the church and my own experience within the church, which is this. Regardless of what we believe about doctrine and organisation and priests, and there is a strong anti-clericalism which is not entirely unjustified within our community, there's one thing that parishes offer that regional organisations don't. They're in your suburb. When you go to this central point, you're meeting people who live around you, who are part of your everyday community. If you're lucky enough to live in a parish where I live, where the priest is also a second generation, he will network you and he will drag you in and he will introduce you to people. He will get you to help other people within your local community and you will get to know these people. And there's a support, grassroots support network there. If the second and third generation are going to relate to each other as Greeks or as members of a religion or as part of an interest group, it is because they are not artificially but naturally talking to each other and living around each other. And that's where a parish or a regional community centre will assist into the future. If families can integrate, talk to each other, enjoy each other's company in an environment which is not prescriptive, where you don't have to be from this choreo or have this opinion, then perhaps we've got a chance for survival.
Okay, thanks. Yes, Ben. All right. This is not a beauty contest.
I just wanted to make a brief comment about whether non-Greeks can contribute to what it means to be a Greek. And I think that there was a lot of interest about classical Greece, and quite often we're confused about the fact that what we've learned about classical Greece in fact came from non-Greeks. That is the French and the Germans who translated all of that work and who spoke about it. And we also know that a lot of people have migrated to Greece and then have then conveyed their journey there into their own world as well. For example, Leonard Cohen lived in Greece for a period of time. Mm-hmm. And quite many of us know that at the end of the day, when you're picking a football team, just looking in your backyard is not always the best place to look. You want to open it up and explore. And the best thing that we can do as a Greek community is allow, to use an expression, outsiders in. That's the best thing I think we can do.
But is anybody disallowing them? How do you gain entrance, by the way? How do you gain entrance as you're an outsider?
Is this a question about identity?
Well, it's about outsiders or non-Greeks getting in.
To use a very strict definition of Greek, that is what I was referring to.
Mm. Okay. I'm going back to Daniel. All right, Daniel, I want to ask you a question about the church and tradition. I mean, is change always good? Do we need to change tradition institutions? Aren't younger people attracted to tradition as a source of certainty and security?
My initial reaction to that is I fear there's amongst a common public critique a latent ageism. As though those members who are present in the church are somewhat inferior because of their age. And while I take on board the need for change and movement, these people came and worked very hard. And if they find solace and rest on a Sunday in the Sunday liturgy, then that's the Orthodox Church doesn't discriminate according to biological age.
Yes, but that's not what they're saying. They're saying the argument is that when they're gone, are you going to have any people to attend church?
Membership of the Orthodox Church in terms of the creation of identity is baptism.
That's right.
All those people who are baptised are full members of the church. And it's according to their willingness to engage in the traditions and the life of the church, that's up to them.
Oh, their parents.
But no.
I don't think they have a say, do they?
Even up to them, to respect the freedom and the fullness of their person, which is a important theological principle. How do you retain a person? It's a theological answer, and it's God that retains them. Each person is called into the church. As a hospital chaplain and coordinator of hospital chaplaincy, one of my roles, visiting public hospitals, it astounds me the faith that people place in God, in spirituality and religion. And who knows why a person goes to church on a Sunday? Is it to ask for help? Is it to for whatever purpose? And an anecdote from the past, when Russian ambassadors were sent and they entered Hagia Sophia, they remarked it and they were awestruck at the presence of God. Now, if our generation chooses to enter a church and find it boring, well, that's a comment on our contemporary situation and our level of spirituality rather than the church, which we believe is the presence of God on earth and the joining of heaven and earth.
Thanks, Gina. Yes, I've got you next.
Look, I want to say something in response to this because I think Mihalis was asking a different question. And when my son was 6 years old, he came to me and he said, "Mum, how do you get to heaven?" And I said, well, part of the Christian story is that when you die, you go to heaven. But it's not, you know, it's not a material place that exists. And he says, what do you mean? And I say, well, you have to kind of believe in that religion to believe that when you die, you'll go to heaven. Don't you believe in it, Mum? I said, no, I don't. And he was shocked. And then he said, okay. So we had a bit of a talk about why I don't and all that sort of stuff. And he declared that he did believe in God. And I said, okay, I wonder where he's getting this from, but I didn't go there. And then he said to me, but you didn't answer my question. How do you go to heaven? And I said, well, look, it's not like Coburg that you can get on a bus and get to heaven. You know, I had to then explain what religions were and how people have different religions, and, you know, kids that he went to school with had different religions, etc., which he came to understand himself. So this went on for quite some time, for about a year and a half. And then he went to the community Greek school, and they took them to church for a service. And he thought it was so boring and so terrible that he lost interest after that. I didn't have to intervene at all. So I guess, how is the church going to remain relevant to the Greek community of the third or fourth generation? I think that's the question, you know. And I think also...
should it be relevant?
Well, I mean, I don't really care, but, you know, the thing is...
What you talk, the eyes, we use the eye. What we
Well, the thing is, look, I mean, there isn't a homogenous Greek identity, by the way, right? There's class, there's sex, there's religion or atheism, there's politics. I don't necessarily, I don't identify with somebody who supports, votes and is a member of Golden Dawn, you know, just because they happen to be Greek. There's no virtue in somebody being Greek as opposed to being something else. It is what I was born into, and it's my cultural expression, but it's no better or no worse than Irish or Japanese or Korean. And it interests me, I guess, because I speak the language and I read Greek literature and I'm interested in Greek music, and that's something that, you know, is part of who I am and it's part of my expression. But no, to me it doesn't matter if the Greek church fails in this regard or succeeds. And I mean, I guess from my own personal view, I would like the Greek community to be active in the future in some other area apart from religion. It would be very deficient if the Greek identity in Australia was solely based on religion.
But it could be that it's central. Is religion central to the Greek identity?
I totally agree with you.
Which one?
Gina, with
that's good,
Gina,
because there's a few of them.
That definitely religion should not be always part of the Greek identity. But let me share with you my experience every Sunday. I've got this habit to go every Sunday to church for many reasons. One of the reasons is because I am a chanter. And the two priests that serve the particular church, one of them was born in Australia, and the other one is not even Greek, he's Italian. His name is Father Antonio Cagnoni, I think. Yep. And a number of the people who attend the Sunday service are not even Greeks. They are married to Greeks. I can see Vietnamese, Chinese, Argentinians in St. Haralabos Church in Templestowe. And I find that I go to a very multicultural community every Sunday morning, especially when one of the priests is not even Greek. And I find that, you know, you don't have to be Orthodox to be Greek. Nobody can tell you, can define Greekness as being Orthodox. But we have to admit that Orthodoxy is part of the Hellenism, historically and socially. And this is what is happening. And even within the previous cycle, actually, somebody said that, you know, it's always the old people who attend the services. But excuse me, have you been to the church on Easter? I have been. And I can see thousands of people attending the Easter service. Young people mostly, which is an amazing thing. And that probably means that in the future, those young people will replace the oldies who attend the services nowadays. Just some thoughts, you know, for
very good thoughts.
Sharing.
Okay, you've got a fan club going. All right, who wants to? Daniel, Tass, the youngest member, I believe.
Yeah, it's interesting you say although numbers are dwindling in churches on Sundays, on these major events, there's still thousands of people. The question is why? I guess a lot of people still like the tradition. It's part of our culture, it's part of our history. People still like attending these things, even though it may not be a belief for many people. But going back to the internet thing, I think it is a huge unifying factor moving forward, because just from, I can watch a video of something that's happening in Greece straight away on YouTube. A song comes out, I watch it, the second comes out. I know what someone ate for breakfast in Greece because they tweeted about it. It's bringing people...
And that's a valuable thing, is
very.
it?
It all goes building, it builds a picture. What it does is it builds a picture, it immerses us in the culture of Greece. And people who live on the other side of the world and who have no idea what's happening over there, a lot of people haven't even been. So what does the internet do? It brings us closer to our family, what's happening in Greece. It broadens what we see and think about what's happening overseas, and I think it's an important factor in how we move forward in terms of identifying as Greek and how the Greek community moves forward. So we can't just discard it and say, you know, it's just for stalking or whatever, but...
What about sideways? What about relationships between the diaspora, the Greek Australians and the Greek Americans? Do we always have to go through the national centre, Athens, to meet? But there's not much movement, though.
There isn't, but there should be.
But yeah, right. I mean, you would have seen that there was commonalities. Greek Americans and Greek Australians could learn from it. Greek Uruguayans, yes. And yes, Joe.
Except that, again,
Greek Canadians.
Except coming back to the internet. Right. I mean, you can connect with Greeks worldwide, wherever you are, any time of day or night, on anything, in the tiniest village, the biggest, urban centres. And I think, as I was saying earlier, I think that's the really powerful force of the future. And I think it's a positive thing. And I think what you'll find is, in fact, Greek identity may not be so obsessed with the church. I mean, for the last 15 minutes, I think our discussion has been around the church. And I do wonder
Kostas is interjecting, you see.
Whether the future generations will be so obsessed about attending church as their Greek moral compass, frankly. Because I think it's going to be much more interactive worldwide. I take the point about the regionality and the local, and I think that'll continue, but I think the power of the international is about to descend on us, and I think it's going to... Sorry?
The regionality's dying.
The regionality might be dying, but this is a way of reviving it. I mean, when my niece at the age of 10 connects with her first cousin or second or third cousin in Florida, and they have this big conversation about being in Florida.
Okay,
Well,
microphone.
Hang on.
Troy, give it around.
Thank you. Just one point. As long as nation states exist, as long as languages exist, as long as, they've been around for thousands of years. This does not automatically imply they will be around in the future. But let's not override experiences, collective or individual, in the name of the internet. Let's not underestimate the powerful impact of face-to-face interaction, social relations, and the rest. Yes, the internet is changing the nature of the game, but let's keep at the back of our mind a few question marks. That's all I want to say.
Costa, but does Hellenism need the nation state, the modern Greek state?
I missed the first
Hellenism, Hellenismos.
Yeah.
Does it need the nation state? It pre-existed, it could post-existed. Do we have to go through that vehicle?
Human dealings, I mean, people interact through companies, through states, through associations. Hellenism is something much bigger than the Greek state. But since we do have those formations of dealings and associations, let's not forget it. That's all I'm saying. I'm saying that Hellenism is bigger than the state, but there is a role for the state as well.
Okay. Now I've got Andonis telling us to wind up. Any burning contribution? Burning, I'm talking burning. Something that, you go home, you say, oh, Michalis didn't let me say that. No? No? Come on, Bill, I see you tittering on the edges here, yes. Don't give us a sort of, it's a good thing we're doing this, and patronise us, little, bravo, Michalaki, you did a good thing here.
This event rocks, is that what you want to hear?
I don't think...
I was just going to finish up on the issue of identity, and it's quite fluid.
Good.
It's very fluid, and what we're seeing is, and I think it touches on what Costa said and what Joyce said, mobility is constant at the moment. Our parents, a lot of the first generation now spend 6 months in Greece, 6 months here, so their experiences are very direct. My daughter, who is 9 years old, has been to Greece 8 times. So she no longer goes to Greece and has this, oh wow, I've met my cousin for the first time, and what do I say to him? She now treats every time she sees her friends and relatives in Greece as another experience. The internet has played a role in that as well, of course, as has social media, whereby our experiences relatively are immediate, and we can interact in a way where we haven't in the past. But I think at the same time we can't avoid the fact that it's the personal interaction is very important. I don't think volunteerism is dead in the second and third generations at all. We've seen a resurgence in interest in participation, providing the events themselves are relevant and interesting. The past, for us, for many of us, is intriguing only when it's powerful. And so when we relive the past ourselves, we don't feel like it's the past when we dance or we sing a song. We're reliving it now for the time being, but we're doing so because it's actually powerful through dance or music or whatever it is. While at the same time we see our attraction to Greece, it's because of its social nature. And I think that's the part that drags us back as well and has a very important impact on our own identity here. And that's all I was going to say.
Thank you. Now we've got some time for Q&A, and I'll give this to you. You take over. All right. Okay. Now, how you want to do this? Okay. All right, my job is done. Okay. All right, now we need the mics to work.
We'll call on all the participants to make themselves somehow available so I can see where they are.
We're going to empty the room.
Empty the room. This question time will be open to everyone. What we'll do is, thank you to everyone for their comments. Just a few points before we move into question time. Just do keep in mind, we will do our best to moderate this. It may be a touch like herding cats, but we'll get there, I'm sure. Keep in mind that the questions may be directed to specific panellists, both Circle 2 and Circle 1. I will do my best to keep things as brief as possible, including myself. But one last comment before we launch into this is that indeed an opinion is to be advanced and considered rather than excluded and derided. So please do keep that in mind as we have our discussions, however polarised these thoughts may be.
Let's go into it.
Okay.
How do you want to do this?
Just point.
Okay, we've got two over here. If you don't mind introducing yourself.
My name is Savas Gugaropoulos. I came out in 1954 as a 5-year-old boy. I'd like to say, as a question, as a statement, and as a question to the panel, first and foremost, the idea of being Hellenic and wanting to be Hellenic stems from antiquity, our love of the golden era, the classical era of Greece. And that's what binds us and makes us feel the idea of wanting to be Hellenic stems from that legacy, that admiration. From my opinion, it doesn't come from Byzantium, and it doesn't come from the Greek Orthodox Church or being of the Greek Orthodox faith. I'd like your comments on that.
Pick on someone. Don't give it generic. There's 19 of them, 18 of them. We're here all night. Only with Costa Nicolopoulos.
The other statement and question I'd like to make is that to survive as a community after being in this country for close to 120 years, we have not become a structured community in any shape or form in each state. We do not have a federation in each state. There's no common belonging. There's no structure of joining somewhere and going up the ranks with your voluntarism and so forth. I think, and that's been hindered enormously by everybody, especially by the first generation. There's no fantasia, no imagination about moving forward in that direction. The other thing I'd like to say is that...
Question.
That's
come on.
Just bring it to the question.
Just one more thing. To belong to an organisation, to a community, to be a Hellene, unless we change our attitudes of having love for one another, real, genuine care for one another, wanting to help one another as individuals and as belonging to community organisations, if those attitudes do not change, are not developed, are not nurtured to become something really great, where a kid that's 5 sees that, they don't have to be brainwashed, they see it, they understand it when they're 5 and 10 and 15 and they love it. And that gives them a feeling, I want to belong. If we don't develop that, there won't be a future Hellenic community.
Just to make a point.
That's all right. No,
ladies and gentlemen, keep the questions brief.
Questions, no comments.
Questions only,
We've only got
please.
20 minutes. It's not a question, it was a statement. That's fair enough, you said your piece.
Θα ήθελα να γυρίσω στο πρώτο group, στον κύριο Ζαφυρόπουλο. Είχε πει όταν ήρθε στην Αυστραλία ήταν νέος, ήταν young. Νομίζεις ότι γέρασες? Αν πούμε ότι γεράσαμε, όλοι οι οργανισμοί μας τελειώσανε. Πρέπει να κρατήσουμε, για να μπορέσουμε να κρατήσουμε αυτό που είπε ο Βασίλης, περισσότερο από 15-20 χρόνια. Άμα φύγουμε εμείς και μείνουμε στα σπίτια μας, τελειώσανε. Και η ερώτησή μου είναι, σε όλους εδώ και στα δύο groups, τι μπορούμε να κάνουμε να φέρουμε την νεολαία στους οργανισμούς μας. Εάν δεν φέρουμε πίσω την νεολαία, θα τελειώσουμε ως ελληνική παροικία, θα πεθάνουμε. Αυτό είναι το παν. Τι μπορούμε να κάνουμε για την ελληνική παροικία. Ευχαριστώ.
The question to both circles, but predominantly the first is, what Mike Zafidopoulos is, what can the generation do, the elder statesmen and stateswomen do to bring the youth with them?
Mentioned.
I will let Rena respond to this question, but I should point out to Paul that it wasn't my fault that they put me in the wrong group.
Νομίζω ότι μερικές από τις απαντήσεις δόθηκαν από το πάνελ το νούμερο 2. Είναι γεγονός ότι θα πρέπει να εγκαταλείψουμε εμείς που έχουμε ένα χρώμα όμορφο στα μαλλιά μας και να δώσουμε τη σκητάλη σε ανθρώπους οι οποίοι όμως έχουν την εκτίμηση, το σεβασμό και την αναγνώριση στα θεμέλια και να μην κοιτάμε να κρατάμε την καρέκλα και να μην θέλουμε να την παραδώσουμε, γιατί οι οργανισμοί δεν πρόκειται ποτέ να πλαισιωθούν από αυτούς τους ανθρώπους και τους νεότερους. Έτσι πιστεύω. Πρέπει να γίνει μία ομπρέλα, πρέπει όλοι να συνεργαστούν και να γίνει αυτό που κάποια πράγματα ακούσαμε για τους Ιταλούς. Οι Ιταλοί έχουν μία.
Ρένα,
sorry, Νίκο μου, ξέρεις, εγώ μπλα μπλα μπλα.
Το ξέρω και δεχτώ. The answer to the question about how to engage the younger members of our community and the vitality of these community organisations is for us to engage with the younger members of the community who will come to this process free of any prejudices, with respect and with the ability to contribute in such a manner so as to want continued growth rather than to look reflectively on things that have gone.
Είναι πραγματικά δυνατόν αυτοί οι άνθρωποι που κουράστηκε η πρώτη γενιά να τους σπουδάσει και να καμαρώνει σήμερα τον δικηγόρο της, τον γιατρό της, τον κίνο της, τον άλλο της, να μην επιτρέπει να εγκαταλείψει τη θέση αυτή ή το πικισμό και να μην αφήσει αυτούς τους ανθρώπους, τους νέους που έχουν ήδη γίνει όλοι μεταξύ τους. Δεν υπάρχει πια αυτό το τοπικό μεταξύ τους. Μεταξύ τους βλέπουμε ότι συνεργάζονται, ότι θέλουν να προωθηθούν, ότι θέλουν να προωθήσουν κάτι και αυτό πρέπει να το καταλάβει η πρώτη γενιά και όλοι αυτοί που κάθονται σε προεδρικούς όθους.
The message is that the community has to embrace the younger members, so to speak, who they've helped develop collectively, and for the younger members of the community to come to the party as well, and for the older members to understand the value of the contribution that they have to make.
Οι αλλαγές έχουν έρθει και εμείς δεν θέλουμε να τις δεχτούμε. Λοιπόν, αυτό νομίζω ότι χρειάζεται περισσότερη συζήτηση, Μιχάλη. Δεν νομίζω ότι καλύφθηκαν όλα αυτά που ήθελες. Χρειάζεται περισσότερη συζήτηση και χρειάζεται περισσότερη ανάλυση πάνω σε αυτά τα πράγματα, μαζί η πρώτη και η δεύτερη και η τρίτη γενιά, αν μπορείς. Ευχαριστώ πολύ.
Finally, the change is coming, but subject to everything in Hellenism and everywhere, it's subject to further discussion.
Okay, you're the
Indeed.
leader here. So, Chris is one of... Chris, it's your son who directs, not me.
Εγώ ήθελα να αναφερθώ σε ένα άλλο γεγονός, το οποίο και τι περίμενα να αναφερθείτε, ότι η μεγαλύτερη επιτυχία που είχε οι ελληνικές παροικίες που ήρθαν από το 60 μέχρι και το 80 ήταν η επέμβαση που μπορέσαμε να κάνουμε στα πολιτικά κόμματα και μέσα σε αυτή, δηλαδή έγινε μεγάλη πίεση και κατορθώσαμε να πάρουμε θέσεις, να βάλουμε και τα ελληνικά ακόμα σε δημοτικά σχολεία. Ειδικότερα στη Μελβούρνη που ήταν μεγάλη η επιρροή μας μέσα στο εργατικό κόμμα και στα άλλα κόμματα όσο μπορούσαμε, κατορθώσαμε πολλά πράγματα. Δεν έγινε καμία αναφορά και αν θα μπορούσε αυτό να συνεχιστεί από την καινούργια γενιά που είναι σήμερα εδώ, να γραφούν στα κόμματα, να δουλέψουν μέσα, να πάρουν και θέσεις, γιατί κάποια στιγμή θα πέφτουμε έξω και από εκεί.
Ευχαριστούμε.
Can I make a response to that, please?
Sure, can I just translate that for a moment?
Sorry, I spoke in English.
That's right, your English is much better than mine.
The point being made is that the generation on stage and the generation that these ladies and gentlemen here represent have to also be aware of the ability to exert political power through their involvement in the political process. Can I also just remind all our speakers to actually ask questions rather than make statements. We really are pressed for time. We do want to hear from everyone.
Christo, I think that this was a comment that Kostas Karamarkos made, and I think it's really important. I think that the Greek community in the past, I went to Theo Sideropoulos' funeral, and one of the people who got up and spoke, and this was in the 1990s, said he represented the parents of people who campaigned to get Greek in the public school system. I'd never heard of this organisation, and I was so impressed that this organisation existed, that people fought for these things. And I think there may be a tendency, because of our individualist culture, to believe that we can achieve things on our own, but collectively we have a lot more clout and we have a lot more power. And I often get on the phone to Bill Papasteriadis and I say to him, listen, Bill, what you need to do is get out there and speak about this and this and this, about Golden Dawn and how, we don't want them here, blah, blah, blah. I voted for you, so, you're my president, get out there and do it. And one of the things that does hearten me is that Bill has been a very inclusive president, and I'm not sucking up to him now. I think everyone has their own way of doing things, and he's perhaps, he's got his own style. I'm not going to comment on that, but they have been a lot more inclusive, and I think that the collective will of the community has to be expressed in lots of different ways. So, yeah.
Thank you. Next question.
Yusuf, I'll bring this.
Thanks, everyone.
We'll come back to you. We'll come back.
I am non-Greek. I am Palestinian Arab, and I'm very delighted to have been here. Thank you for having me. Thank you. I was even more delighted to find out that one of the earliest Greek migrants came from Jerusalem, and which connects me to my question about Egypt this time. And I guess the first panel, hopefully, I'm not sure which one, mentioned the issue of Egypt. What does Egypt represent to Greek Egyptians who migrated to Melbourne? When they remember Egypt, is this the lost heaven? Is this something with negative image? I will be very interested in finding out more about what Egypt or the Arab world in general represents to Greek Egyptians. Thank you.
Who'd like to take that question? George? George? And then we'll come back to
I can comment, if people can hear me, I can comment in part on that. I think a lot of the Greek Egyptians that came to Australia suffered from the belief that they had lost paradise. They really did, and they behaved in that manner too. Being multilingual in many cases, some of them found it very easy to settle, but they carried with them, it's perhaps not the best term, but a set of neuroses. They were so used to leading a very good life in Egypt. And it took them a long time to accommodate to the difficulties of life in Australia. They didn't have the servants. Unfortunately, some of the women had to learn to cook. It's an absurd statement to make. It's an absurd statement to make, perhaps to some people, but it's true. They didn't have the advantages of the life in Egypt, where they'd had access to a separate legal system, which the Egyptians didn't share, but the agreements were such in Egypt that English, French, Italians and Greeks were able to take advantage of different laws and rules relating to their conduct.
George, if I could bring you to the question, how will that community be remembered, if at all?
Well, they are now part of the general Greek parrhekia. I just want to make one quick comment there. We keep talking about parrhekia as if we mean community and treating it as organisation and not as the diffuse set of structures that it is. Now, the Greek Egyptians were once a very solid organisation. Those of us that remember Alma down in South Melbourne know the vicissitudes that have occurred with the sale of the property in Whiteman Street and the purchase up in Bell Street.
A couple more moments, George.
Yeah, thanks. And that's created havoc, but it also reflects in part too that community is slowly diminishing in its understanding of itself. That's
Thank you.
most of
With reference to, I'll just go back to one of the questions that was answered. The participant had to leave, and I think we had someone from the front row.
Yeah.
Costa, this is not nepotism, but how...
I think we have not responded convincingly to the question put by Mr. Mavroudis. What shall we do? Should we reject the first generation and adopt the second? How should we go about it? I'd say that in recent years, we the Greeks have been dueling to the extremes, or in the extremes. We're either in favour of one and against the other, or vice versa. I think we have to strike for balance. The old should not reject the new should not reject the old, because each generation has to contribute. Experience cannot be purchased. Money cannot buy experience. I often say to members of our community that what characterizes the younger generation from the old generation is the older generation had two F's, two F's. Φιλοδοξία, but και φιλότιμο. In recent days, unfortunately, what we experience is that some members of our of the younger generations do have the φιλοδοξία, the ambition, but they are lacking the φιλότιμο, the desire to help. So what I'm suggesting is that what the community should be struggling for is balance. Balance positively the good with the bad, so that we can get into the next stage.
Dimitri, if you just have a look behind Sure.
I'm sorry, I have to take voice and make a very short statement before I ask the question. My name is George Luke. For my sins, I'm the Honorary Consul General for Poland in Melbourne. And I wondered why I was invited to this August gathering. Now it has dawned upon me. And I can say that the Polish community, particularly in Melbourne, Victoria, suffers from exactly the same questions as have been posed today and discussed by the two panels. So my question is, perhaps all the communities should somehow join together in propagating their own national characteristics and thereby enriching the multicultural state of Victoria.
Perhaps a comment from Circle 1 and then from Circle 2. Does anyone feel like that? Oh.
Sorry, I've just got this lady up the back.
We'll come to that question in
I just wanted to share a vision that I have. I was born and raised in this country. I endured the trauma of having to go to Greek school. For some strange reason, I became a Greek teacher. I thought I could do something better than what I was offered. My vision and my challenge to the Greek community is two-stemmed. I get annoyed when I hear the term non-Greeks. We're not looking at people as barbarians and Hellenes anymore. We have to grow over that. We have to surpass that. Let's try and create more Phil-Hellenes in this wonderful country called Australia. Let's embrace our children's neighbours and friends and bring them along to their local schools so they can learn the language and the culture. Let's address the issue of why we have failed in maintaining our Greek language in our state schools in the state of Victoria, and that is a uniquely Victorian experience. And I think, Michali, we need another dialogue on this specific topic, but we need to pick up the challenge, embrace the national curriculum, and go back to the grassroots level and start the awareness of the 60s and the 70s, which I saw my father fighting for, and I'm still fighting for them. So, Gina, we're at uni together and a few other people. I really want to see our grandchildren have the opportunity to bring their mates from the streets to the Greek class in their local state schools. And I hope you share the vision also.
I guess that de facto answers Dr. Luke's question, but if someone could address that in terms of the wider vision of communities banding together to assist in... yes. Sure.
Recently, there was a very prominent visitor to Melbourne. His name was Boris Johnson, and he was the Mayor of London. And he was invited to come to Melbourne to launch the Writers' Festival. And it just happened that I was able to attend that function. So he began talking about who is the earliest writer in history? Who do we acknowledge and respect? And if you know Boris Johnson, he's got this big buffy white hairstyle and he looks around like this. A great character. Of course, nobody knew. My point is, the very next day, he was invited to a luncheon where prominent Melburnians were invited. And he said to them, ladies and gentlemen, should you ever find yourself in a difficult situation, for example, if you're in Kakadu and you are swinging from the vines with alligators snapping at your feet, what I suggest you do is to recite Homer. At that point, he recited Homer. 50 lines. He went straight into it without hesitation whatsoever. And of course, everyone was gobsmacked. My point is that we have talked about Hellenism. Moving forward, we need to protect our language, modern Greek, ancient Greek, and the classics. And we should make it available not just to Greeks, but everybody who wants to do it.
Further questions? Up the back there.
Thank you for the opportunity to say a few things. My name is Melissa Afantoulis, and I'm presently documenting the history of the mass migration of people who came from Limnos, which is an island, as many of you know, under Joy de Mussi's supervision. I'm using oral history. So I'm talking to both first and second generation. What I want to share with you in response to some of the issues and questions that have been raised tonight is that I'm really optimistic about the future with, in relation to the second and third generation. And I guess I just wanted to challenge what seems to be a stronger view emerging that we've lost those generations in terms of their identity as Greeks. The issue is that I think we've got to change the way we see it. It's not necessarily about bringing the young people into the existing organisational structures. It might be that we have to engage with them and we might have to be prepared to see changes in the structures because they may not be the way they can identify and be part of. That's one point. My question is, as a dialogue...
If you could conclude quickly, please. Briefly, rather.
And my question is, firstly, tonight's initiative is fantastic, and I congratulate you for initiating it. Can we see further dialogues which actually focus on the younger generations speaking and telling us how we can go about doing things that are more inclusive?
Someone from the panel wish to take that question? We'll come to Bill or Dean.
If the second generation, and third generation, which is afforded a great amount of freedom. Remember, in the second and third generation, all these moral virtues and mores of the first generation have disintegrated. Okay? We are offered a very large amount of freedom that our parents did not have. And don't you think that it's not a question of the first generation trying to engage us, per se, but us finding our own way within the structures and within the own structures that we choose to make. It is telling that the only autonomous structure which has been created by the latter generations is Nugas. It's the only one. Yes, and I take Bill's point that there are second, third generation people that engage within the existing structures. I'm one of them. Bill's one of them. However, the vast majority choose not to. The vast majority are not represented by organisations, do not define themselves by organisations. And I'll let you in on a little secret. Most of the first generation don't either anymore. The Greek identity, such that it is, exists within families who associate with each other on the basis of a common origin. That's about it. Everything else is just cream.
Thank you, Dean. We've got time for one more question. I think the microphone's been promised to someone. That will be our last question.
Thank you. My name is Varvara Ioannou. I'm the founder and chair of the Food for Thought Greek-Australian Women's Network. I just want to respond to a question that was raised earlier. How do we engage with the second generation? We have some experience over the last 12 years in being able to engage the second and third generation. Our motto is connecting generations, professions and cultures. And the simple answer is being relevant. That is the simple answer, being relevant to those people. Just looking around here, no criticism. We've only got one Gen Y in the audience. The rest are all Gen Xers and baby boomers. And Gen Ys may not want to engage in a forum like this. Joy raised the internet as a forum. Maybe put something like this on the internet. Thank you.
We could go viral, perhaps. That'd be great, wouldn't it?
Nico, can I make a point? Just a very brief point on the issue about membership.
We've got Bill to make a point. Ladies and gentlemen, one last question, and then we will adjourn for the evening.
I don't believe, I'll just make a very brief point on participation. I don't believe you need to be a member of an organisation to participate anymore. People participate in very different ways. Simply attending events for many people is a means of expression, and so the way people contribute doesn't necessarily have to involve membership of an organisation anymore.
So we'll make this question quick, and I lied, which is not the thing to do in here. We'll have one more over there and we'll be done for the evening.
It'll be a quick question. My name's Evan Binos. Question directed to Kostas Nikolopoulos. The role and the vision of the National Greek Day celebrations in the next 10, 20 years. What vision and what role do you think the National Greek Day celebrations will have?
Yep. Try and keep it as brief as we can.
To start off with, I'm only the secretary of the organisation, and I'm not dictating the agenda. The agenda is determined by the community itself. There is almost 40 major organisations represented in the organising committee. So whatever the community decides, that will happen. One thing, however, we want to make certain, not because of chauvinistic, nationalistic or patriotic zeal, if you will, is that we continue commemorate the Greek National Day, adhering to the axiom that people, groups, individuals who don't know their background, who do not know where they come, they do not know where they're heading to. So on the basis of that, we think that the commemoration of the Greek National Day should be maintained. The content, the shape, the level of involvement, or the mixture of it, will be determined by the community which is represented in the organising committee.
Thank you. Our final questioner.
Hello, my name is Dionis Mertiris. I am a PhD student at Trobe University. And I think we've pretty much established here that even though Orthodoxy is a great part of Hellenism, it does not define Hellenism. And I'm just wondering, without having anti-Orthodox sentiments, why do we still call the Greek community the Greek Orthodox community? Yeah. It's just a question. And for example, I have a Greek friend at Trobe University, but he's Jewish. And I'm just wondering, how would we feel if he came here to attend this event? Or how would we feel if a person that is an immigrant right now in Greece, and they're 20 years old and they learned Greek as their first language, and then they traveled to Australia, they attended this event, how would we feel about that?
Thank you. Bill?
Very briefly, the organisation was set up in 1897. When it was originally set up, it was set up primarily to deal with the spiritual needs of the then small Greek population, and they did it primarily to try and bring a priest from Greece when Evangelismos was first set up, which was 2 years later towards the late 1800s. Hence, when the organisation and the constitution was written, as a historical then account of what it actually was doing, it was the Greek Orthodox community. Since then, of course, we had the establishment of the Archdiocese here in the 60s, which has taken on that responsibility. The organisation largely now is cultural and educational in its focus.
Thank you, Bill. And our last comment is from Daniel.
That's okay. When the Orthodox Church, when the Greek Orthodox Church calls itself Greek Orthodox, it doesn't identify itself with the nation state of Greece. In the late 1800s, that was the identification of an Orthodox Church with a nation state was declared heretical. And so we in Australia are not in any way aligned to the Church of Greece, rather the Church of the Ecumenical Patriarchate of Constantinople. Now, it was a characteristic of Byzantium and the Byzantine Empire of a commonwealth of nations and an ecumenical, and if you want to use a common term, multicultural community that Byzantium and particularly Constantinople became. Sorry? No.
Daniel?
Anyway.
Just to steal your final point.
Yeah, so a Jewish person is more than welcome within an Orthodox community. Yeah, just so I have to wind up. Yeah.
We have to wind up. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, I would like to thank you for your attendance tonight. To our panellists, thank you very much for your learned comments. A round of applause to each and every one of them. Thank you for your honesty and contribution, and for all your years of effort and effort to continue. Before you go, please, ladies and gentlemen, to our partners again, thank you very much. La Trobe University, the Greek Orthodox Community of Melbourne, the Victorian Multicultural Commission, the Centre for Dialogue. Also, to our friends at St Michael's Uniting Church, we are in your debt for your assistance. Thank you again to the Reverend Dr. Francis McCabe, Ms. Sylvia Cozier, General Manager, and of course Mr. Jackson Rain, who's been amazing as a Technical Director. To our wonderful volunteers, and here please do stay a moment to show your appreciation. Thank you for all your hard work. I will name them because they've worked tirelessly. Dimitris Gornis, Kostas Grapsas, Jim Levedis, Dr. Michail, Stella Michael, Panagiotis Padadzis, Nikos Panopoulos, Adonis Piperoglu, Ioanna Sarikoudis and Stella Sarikoudis. On behalf of the organising committee and myself, Merry Christmas to you and yours, and a healthy and happy New Year. We hope to see you next time. Thank you.